A world filled with superheroes and S-rank monsters, but the protagonist? He's just a powerless nobody. While everyone admires heroes with insane abilities, Joe Schwantian accidentally gets caught in a disaster involving a terrifying S-rank monster called the Forest King. Right when he's about to die, a mysterious goddess appears in his mind and offers him something far more dangerous than superpowers: immortal cultivation. While the entire world relies on abilities, he becomes the only person using ancient cultivation techniques capable of crushing monsters that even top heroes fear. And without further ado, let's get into the video because this one is insane. Recently, some criminals dumped nuclear material into the sea, resulting in mutations in several marine species. To deal with this situation, the Hero Association sent 2 S-rank heroes, and now this is being broadcast live on the radio. The monsters try to attack the hero, but Neon Dongxia gets irritated, thinking those guys are shameless, wondering how much nuclear material they had to release to create so many mutations. The hero easily manages to defeat the first 2 monsters, however, several more appear and he gets annoyed, saying that this fight never ends. However, he does not panic, since he has a plan to finish all of them at once. He uses his ability, Sea Telekinesis Tornado, creating a whirlpool of water and hitting all the monsters at the same time. Meanwhile, inside a classroom, Joe Schwantian, an ordinary, non-awakened person, watches the live stream saying that Neon Dongxia truly deserves to be an S-rank hero because he is incredible. Suddenly, he remembers that his school is near the sea, so maybe he can go take a look. This is a world of superpowers, and those capable of using them are called heroes. They are admired by thousands of people all over the world, and people without superpowers like Schwantian have no choice but to remain only within the urban area under the jurisdiction of the world government. But Schwantian had a different view of all of this. He looks toward the hallway and realizes that the guard had gone toward the cafeteria and this is his chance to escape. He runs out, saying that he needs to get there quickly because he needs to get Dongxia's autograph. At the bottom of the sea, at the base of the nuclear power plant, the Water Witch receives a notification saying that they have already finished there and asking whether she managed to find the source of the mutation. She explains that she is almost finished there too and asks for 2 more minutes. She is also an S-rank hero, as well as the president of the Hero Association. Meanwhile, inside the base, one of the employees warns his boss that from the monitor they can see someone approaching at high speed. The boss gets irritated, asking if this is some kind of joke because how could anyone reach that place since that nuclear power plant was built at a depth of 5,000 meters? Suddenly, the Water Witch manages to break through the wall and says that she has finally found the source of the whole problem. As soon as she enters, the people are surprised, and one of the employees says that he knows those silver hairs and that outfit very well. So she is probably the Water Witch. The Water Witch asks how they dare bring trouble to the place under her jurisdiction. She begins attacking everyone, saying that they need to pay a very heavy price for everything they have done. She receives another call on the radio and someone introduces himself, saying that he is the new anchor of the radio station called Superpower because he had heard that she was searching for the origin of the mutation and asks what the situation is now. She says that he called at the right time because she has just dealt with the people responsible. In addition, she also found the factory and will separate the nuclear contaminated water later. She looks at everyone, including the live stream, and curses at them all, saying they had better not get in her way again. Because if they think nuclear material is offensive, they just need to call her since she will personally dump it into the body of the person responsible. Schwantian was still watching the live stream and was fascinated by all of it, saying that it is so cool and that apparently having superpowers is amazing. Suddenly, 2 people behind him notice the protagonist, and the young man asks the girl beside him if the clothes he is wearing are not from that school for losers. The girl gets a little confused and asks how he can walk through the streets, because apparently he needs to learn a good lesson. Suddenly, a deity appears and asks what is happening in that world. She is the Lady of Heaven, Queen Mother of the West, known as Alma. She complains, saying that this is filthy and that all those people are filthy. They do not deserve the soul of the Queen Mother, so how will she be able to recover? But among all those corrupted people, she finally finds the protagonist and realizes that she has found someone who is not yet filthy. The man from before looks at the protagonist and starts provoking him, saying that he is nothing but trash and that this is not a place where he can stay, so he needs to leave quickly and go back to his shitty school. The protagonist looks at the young man and asks if he was really just called trash and points out that discrimination against non-awakened people is a violation of the world government's laws, and there is no rule in the world that forbids them from walking through the streets. Schwantian thinks that maybe it would have been better if he had gone out without his uniform because those 2 in front of him look like gangsters. Alma continues observing the situation and is impressed, saying that apparently the protagonist is not bad and has a very good temperament. Besides, the most important thing about him is that Xuantian was born with a strong affinity for the chi of heaven and earth. That talent can be described as innate. Because of that, she needs to check whether he is worthy of becoming the vessel of the Queen Mother. The two who are belittling the protagonist ask what law he's talking about, because the only purpose of the non-awakened is to entertain the awakened. The two take him into the middle of a forest and tie him to a tree. The protagonist starts shouting, saying that the two of them are going crazy and asks to be released because they kidnapped a non-awakened person for no reason. And, apparently, they are not afraid of the police catching them. The woman starts laughing and tells him to be quiet because now they are going to play a little and will think about letting him go once they are satisfied. The man approaches, saying that he recently acquired a new ability and needs to use him as a test subject. The protagonist gets scared, wondering what that guy is trying to do to him. The young man punches the tree, shouting for it to obey. That punch made the tree's roots enter the underworld, and suddenly, a monster appears. The monster asks the humans what they want and how they dared interrupt that king's rest. The protagonist gets scared, asking what the young man did, but the young man only laughs, saying that it worked. He keeps laughing, saying that he will make that entire forest obey his commands. But the monster grabs the two of them with its own hands, and the girl is terrified, asking the boy what he brought to life. That is an S-rank monster known as the Forest King. The Forest King starts shouting, saying that he needs more power. The girl, still unable to move a single muscle, shouts for her companion to hurry up and do something, but the boy starts being squeezed and cries out for help. Suddenly, all his life, energy, and power are sucked away. The Forest King says that this is still far too little and that this power is not enough, so he needs more. He throws the girl upward so he can eat her, and the protagonist watches all of it and thinks that, in that situation, he needs to stay calm because it will not be long before a hero appears. The Forest King looks at the protagonist and says that he has terrible luck because how could there be a non-awakened person there? Xuantian says that is exactly right and points out that his flesh tastes very bad, so there is no need for him to eat something that awful. The Forest King grabs the protagonist and starts laughing, saying that the taste of the meat does not matter because food is still food, so he needs to die. Suddenly, a paper with the law of Manhwa appears and causes an explosion in the middle of the forest. The protagonist falls to the ground and Dongfeng Qingmeng, the Taoist successor of the 66th generation, appears, asking if he is all right or if he was badly hurt. Meanwhile, in Mirage City at the Hero Association headquarters, an alert is issued because there has been a violent energy wave near the Wudong Mountain area. Presumably, it is the S-rank monster known as the Forest King. A red-haired woman gets startled, asking what the rankings of the available heroes are. Her secretary explains that most of the S ranks are on missions, but Shining Star should already be on her way back. The redhead asks if that means they only have A-rank heroes in the city. She asks where the president and Dongxia are since they are on a mission in the nearby sea. The secretary explains that Dongxia left for Fenglai City to deal with a hurricane disaster after exterminating the mutant species, and the president is finishing up the incident with the nuclear material and should return in 3 days. The redhead becomes worried upon hearing this news because if that takes 3 days, then the entire headquarters will be destroyed. She shouts to summon all the A-rank heroes in the city immediately, set up a police barrier, and prioritize the citizens' safety. Meanwhile, at the site of the incident, Qingmeng was still trying to talk to the protagonist, asking if he was all right, but he was still a little dazed, wondering if he had been saved, until he realized there was a white silk right in front of him. He turns around and looks at her in awe, saying that her power is incredible, since she managed to use a super powerful flame. Qingmeng wonders why she's being so nosy again, and apparently she is going to get scolded once more. Qingmeng smiles and says that the protagonist is a little wrong in his deduction, because the truth is that she only used an enchantment. Xuantian holds the paper in his hand and asks what an enchantment is, since he has never seen anything like it before. Suddenly, the Forest King appears again, shouting furiously. He prepares to attack, saying that they will pay the price for what they have done. Qingmeng steps in front of the protagonist and tells him to stay behind her, using another explosion. The Forest King keeps attacking, saying that his vines will keep growing no matter how many times she destroys them. Qingmeng focuses and starts chanting, saying, "O great Emperor, the Protector, the unbreakable shield." She creates a magical barrier to protect the two of them and tells the protagonist to stay close and not move. The Forest King tries to attack, but it is useless. He gets confused, asking what is happening and how that woman managed to block his attacks. Xuantian continues becoming more and more surprised, saying that Taoist spell is truly incredible. He feels protected and calls out to the Forest King, asking if he really is an S-rank monster, questioning if that is all he has because he is far inferior to an S-rank hero. The Forest King tells the protagonist not to be so reckless because he is the king of the entire forest and everything there will surrender to him. Suddenly, the monster starts growing several times larger, and the protagonist gets scared, questioning if that is truly the strength of an S-rank monster. Qingmeng shouts, saying that things are not looking so good now, because that was a spell that could withstand ordinary attacks, not that kind of powerful attack. The protagonist realizes that an attack is coming toward them, grabs her and pulls her back, telling her to be careful. The goddess continues watching and realizes that the protagonist is so weak that a simple attack would completely tear him apart. The Forest King says that he has finally caught the two of them and that now he will absorb both of their life energy. Meng starts having her life energy drained and feels an uncomfortable pain because it seems like all the energy inside her body is being pulled out. The protagonist also starts feeling the same thing and suddenly begins to lose consciousness. He tries to resist, but wonders if this really is his end and if he will die in a place like that. But suddenly, inside his consciousness, he hears a voice calling him a brat, asking if it is not too early to give up like this. The protagonist, still lost in his thoughts, asks who is talking to him and where that place is. Alma appears, saying that she thinks he has good talent, and asks why he does not try to learn cultivation and become an immortal with her. Xuantian asks who she is, and the goddess says that she is the person who will help him get out of his current problem. However, he needs to think a little more about what she just said. The protagonist asks if she is sure she can defeat that monster. She says that this is very easy for her, but she will do it as long as he allows her to enter his body to guide him in cultivation and help him become an immortal. Xuantian is surprised by this request and thinks that maybe she is an evil existence that wants to control him. He ends up saying that the idea is not bad, but he wants her to prove that by cultivating and becoming an immortal, he will become superpowered. Deep inside, she becomes furious, questioning how that brat dares to offend her, the Queen Mother herself, because she would have skinned him alive if she were not trying to restore her physical body by using him. She emphasizes that she is not lying to him because there are many great benefits to cultivating and becoming an immortal. The protagonist sits on the ground and asks if she is serious, because if that is true, then she could tell him a little more about it. The goddess approaches and emphasizes that cultivating to become an immortal will calm his mind and help him live for 1,000 or even tens of thousands of years. Then he will have plenty of time to learn the ways of the world and understand the true meaning of everything. The protagonist is surprised, saying that 1,000 years is ridiculous and that even if it is true, he is not interested in living that long. Alma emphasizes that she has not finished speaking yet because she is sure he will like these other benefits. Especially once he learns to cultivate and become an immortal, he will be able to manipulate the elements. So, needless to say, if he can move mountains, turn the world upside down, and possess the ability to create or destroy worlds, everything will be in the palm of his hands. Xuantian keeps questioning whether she is serious and says that he still does not believe her. While they are there talking about how he is going to become an immortal, he is dying outside on Earth. The goddess says that he is a very ill-mannered brat and asks how her soul will enter his body and support him with her power if he does not open his mind. The protagonist, after receiving a light pat on the head, starts wondering what he should do because that girl's life is being drained because she tried to save him. So he needs to at least try to do what that crazy woman is saying because it is the only way. He agrees, saying that he will become an immortal and do anything as long as she can get him out of that problem. Back in the mountain area, Qingmeng was already unconscious on the ground. The Forest King holds the protagonist, laughing and asking how that little man still dared to speak so boldly to him. Because if he really believes he can stop the next attack, he can wait for that in his next life. But suddenly, Xuantian opens his eyes, and an extremely powerful force begins to surge from inside his body. His hair grows, his eyes change, and he asks who will need to wait for the next life, because he will end this fight immediately. The Forest King is shocked, saying that this is impossible, and asks how the protagonist managed to recover his energy. The protagonist calls upon the ancient gods and asks them to obey his call, ordering them to devour everything in sight. He creates an absurd amount of energy, and the Forest King starts screaming, asking why he could no longer move his own body. Suddenly, he is simply swallowed by that absolute power. Alma realizes that the protagonist managed to use 10% of her power, and that shows that he really is very good. If she can help him cultivate and become an immortal, her revenge will move forward. She disappears, and the protagonist returns to normal, asking where that monster went. In addition, he also notices that his body has changed. His hair has changed color and grown longer, so he gets scared, asking what is happening there. The goddess explains that the monster was absorbed by the protagonist's body. She emphasizes that everything she said before was not a lie. After learning her cultivation technique, he will be able to use it to control his power. Xuantian finally understands what is in front of him and emphasizes that this cultivation thing is apparently incredible, and he really wants to learn it. Meanwhile, at Shanghai City School for the Non-Awakened, a plane had stopped and everyone in front of it needed to move as quickly as possible because they could not waste time. If they took any longer, none of them would be able to leave. The woman was trying to restrain the students, saying that there was no reason for them to panic, since the association had already sent 2 A-rank superheroes to protect them, and all of them could evacuate safely. A blonde boy starts looking around and asks Xiaoer if he has seen Xuantian. Xiaoer says that guy probably escaped to watch the A-rank superheroes in battle and that there is no need to worry about him. Meanwhile, near the school, Burning Fiery, the 12th A-rank superhero, was holding back the advance of the monsters. But Quickblade was angry because he was stealing all his prey. He quickly advances with his sword, cutting down all the other monsters around him. Fiery asks what the fun is in fighting those weak monsters because he wanted to fight the Forest King face to face. Quickblade tells him not to be so arrogant because S-rank monsters compared to those little creatures are completely different races. And if he decides to do that alone, he will only be embarking on a suicide mission. Suddenly, the monsters surrounding the two of them notice something and immediately run back. Quickblade asks what that was and why all the monsters are retreating. Fiery wonders if it is possible that the Forest King was defeated. The protagonist, who was approaching, notices the horde of small monsters coming toward him and asks what is wrong with them. He tries to use his powers again but realizes that it is not working. Alma warns him that the mere fact that he managed to execute that power before means that he is indeed very talented, but if he wants to use it again, he will need to cultivate more. Completely terrified, he asks if this is some kind of joke because if that is the case, then his only option is to run. The goddess continues explaining that cultivation requires time and cannot be rushed, so he needs to run as fast as possible. Xuantian says that she made it sound easy and orders her to hurry up and help him think of a solution. Otherwise, he will be torn into pieces. Suddenly, the sky begins to change and powerful lightning takes the place of the clouds. Shining Star, an S-rank hero, was trying to catch up. Chen Xingxuan, the president's daughter, was still in the middle of the forest looking for her bracelet because originally she had gone there to see if her superpowers had returned. She hears a noise, looks back and gets scared, asking where so many monsters came from. She tries to run away and realizes that she's being very unlucky that day, but keeps running, saying that she cannot die no matter what. Suddenly, she runs into the protagonist and shouts for him to get out of the way, but there was no time. She falls on top of him and he starts smiling, asking if he has already reached paradise. Xingxuan gets up and apologizes, saying that she did not see that they were coming. The protagonist says that they had better focus on the current situation because they are surrounded. Besides, if she is in the middle of the forest, then that means she must also be one of those awakened people, and he asks her to use her powers immediately. Xingxuan says that she is indeed awakened, but she is without her bracelet, so she is unable to use her powers. The protagonist gets confused, wondering what kind of power requires the use of external objects to be activated. He asks her if she is not lying and if she can really eliminate those monsters if she has that bracelet. Xingxuan gets angry and shouts that she is not lying, because if she really has her bracelet, then she can eliminate all that trash in only 3 seconds. Xuantian places Qingmeng on the ground and says that the forest is enormous, and looking for a tiny bracelet inside it is like looking for a needle in a haystack. He thinks for a moment and asks the Queen Mother if she is going to come out to help him, because she cannot disappear at such a critical moment. He tells Xingxuan to forget the bracelet for now because they are already surrounded. He asks her to carry Qingmeng on her back because he will stay behind and distract those beasts. Suddenly, the protagonist notices that there is a bracelet tangled around the horn of one of the monsters and asks her if that is the bracelet she was looking for. Xingxuan says yes and emphasizes that this is why she could not find it. Xuantian says that it is all right and charges forward, saying that he will trust her because he hopes she can indeed eliminate all those monsters in only 3 seconds. He thinks that if this does not work, then against all those monsters, he definitely will not even last 3 seconds. He charges forward with his bare hands to attack one of the monsters, manages to grab the bracelet, and throws it to her at the last second. He shouts that this is the end for him, but she puts on the bracelet and tells him not to worry because he will not die since now she is able to show a bit of her power. She lifts all the monsters and snaps her fingers, making all of them explode simultaneously. Xuantian is impressed, saying that it is incredible because it looks like fireworks. However, his joy does not last long and he complains because new monsters have appeared again. Xingxuan says that there is no problem because now she can turn all of them into dust. New explosions happen and within a few seconds, all the monsters had been completely eliminated. The protagonist praises her again, saying that the firepower is truly incredible. He asks what kind of technology that is and whether he can test it a little too. But Xingxuan says that he cannot even think about it because That bracelet was custom made for her and is not available to the general public. However, she realizes that she is feeling a little strange because maybe she used too much of her power. The ground begins to shake and the protagonist questions what is happening. Suddenly, the two of them start falling. Meanwhile, Dongfeng Zhaoshu, Qingmeng's father, was angrily searching for his daughter since she never listens to him. He goes to the hole and uses his abilities to levitate the protagonist, Xing Xuan, and his daughter. He looks at her, thinking that apparently she has already forgotten the family rules. At the Hero Association headquarters, the redhead still could not understand anything, asking if the energy source really disappeared and what was going on, because perhaps some hero had defeated the Forest King. Her secretary says that they have not received any reports so far. This makes the redhead think that maybe the Forest King could be hiding. She asks them to send an investigation team immediately and not rest until they find the Forest King's remains. An investigation team is quickly sent into the forest and they wonder whether a hero really managed to eliminate the Forest King. While searching, they find Xingxuan and Xuantian. They are taken to the hospital and the protagonist's sister runs out, thinking that her brother needs to be more careful because he cannot get hurt and wondering why he was in the middle of the forest. Suddenly, two men stop in front of her, asking if she is there to see her brother. One of them says that he is very lonely there and asks her to stay with them for a while. She thinks that apparently those idiots are looking for death because she is in a great hurry. She tries to solve everything without violence, asking if they are really capable of bullying someone as adorable as her. The man says that the truth is that they are not bullying her, only asking her to spend a little time there with them, and he thinks that she is very beautiful. The protagonist's sister loses her patience and punches the man in the face, saying that this is extremely annoying and tells him to get out of her way already. She keeps running and goes to her brother's room. The doctor asks if she has family and tells her not to worry because he only got hurt a little. But as soon as she looks at her brother, she's surprised, saying that he had short hair and it was a little darker, so how did he become like that? This makes her wonder if he is really okay. The doctor is surprised and says that according to the reports, there is nothing unusual about his health, but now he needs to leave and asks her to stay there and take care of him for a while. While sitting beside her brother, she thinks that this is a little strange and wonders how he could suddenly appear in the forest and come out injured, because if anything happens to him, she will never be able to forgive herself. She cries, thinking that she needs money, but on the outside, she keeps a smile on her face, telling her brother that she needs to go work a part-time job. Otherwise, she will not be able to pay the hospital bills, and that she will come back to see him at night. As soon as the protagonist is alone, the goddess appears, saying that it is time for him to wake up and begin his training. Xuantian slowly opens his eyes and asks where he is and where those two girls are. The goddess says that they are fine and tells him not to worry. He gets up even more frightened and asks why he is inside a hospital and how long he slept. The goddess says that maybe it was about half a day. He thinks that he needs to get out of there immediately in case the doctor tries to keep him there, because that will cost a fortune. Sometime later, back in his room, he thinks that the hospital probably sent the bill to his sister, which makes him wonder what he should say when she comes back that night. In that world, the non-awakened are incapacitated by the government, so the protagonist cannot work and cannot even decide to leave the hospital on his own. He thinks that he does not know exactly how much the medical bills are, but he hopes that his sister will not be too angry with him. Alma asks what is wrong with him because they can take the first step toward immortality. The protagonist gets excited because he had already managed to eliminate an S-rank monster, and after learning to cultivate, he will probably become a superhero too. That way, his sister will no longer need to shoulder all the family expenses alone. Alma touches his forehead and takes him to another place. The protagonist asks where he is. She explains that this is the space she reserved for him. Since he is still a beginner, it is important that he enter the Qi training stage as quickly as possible. Xuantian asks what exactly that means. The goddess says that she will explain from the beginning because there are 6 stages of cultivation, which are Qi training, foundation building, golden core, energy refinement transformation, Mahayana, and ascension. The ascensions require him to go through tribulations. The farther he advances, the more difficult cultivation becomes. And after all of that, lastly, he reaches the final stage, which is being considered an immortal. If he wants to enter the Qi cultivation period, he must try to absorb the essence of heaven and earth to transform his body and fill it with spiritual energy. But with all that explanation, the protagonist was almost going crazy. The goddess notices this and emphasizes that he does not need to understand everything now. First, he needs to enter a meditation posture. He sits down and asks if it is correct. She says yes. Now he needs to close his eyes and feel his surroundings. He will find an energy that is everywhere. It is Qi energy, and he needs to absorb it into his body. The protagonist begins cultivating quickly, and the goddess is impressed to see that he is indeed a genius with a unique affinity for Qi. With immense care, he will become an immortal in less than 100 years and will be a perfect vessel for her to use. Some time ago, the goddess had been ambushed by a man. This was the army. The man was saying that it was time for her to give up her position as Lady of the Gods. All those years she had oppressed everyone because they were men, so they could not take it anymore. He was the true Lord of the Nine Suns. Alma says that he has no right to say that because many submitted to her voluntarily. But the Lord of the Nine Suns shouts that, on that day, she will receive the justice of heaven. The battle between them begins, but she blocks all the attacks, saying that this is ridiculous because she is the Lady of the Heavens, so she is the way of heaven and also the law of heaven. All those who rebelled will die. She counterattacks, demonstrating astonishing and overwhelming power. One of the members becomes desperate, saying that woman has cultivated for 1,000,000 years, so they do not stand the slightest chance. The true Lord says that he already knows that, but they need to continue with the plan. The goddess asks if that really is the level of the celestial realm. Another woman starts laughing and approaches. She is the Orchid Fairy. Hugging the goddess's arm, she smiles and asks her sister to calm down, because those stinking men are very annoying. Because of that, she made a cup of fairy war wine for her. This way, she can increase her battle power and after drinking it, return to the fight. Alma holds the cup and smiles, saying that she is very happy that Orchid is being so kind, because today she will destroy those men and turn the celestial realm into a female world. As soon as she drinks the wine, she realizes that the taste is strange. Suddenly, her spirit begins to separate from her body, and all her energy begins to escape. The Lord of the Nine Suns shouts, saying that now is their only chance. That thing begins absorbing all her energy and spirit. While being absorbed, she wants to know if they really think they can keep her inside with that magic. The true Lord says that this is very obvious. They are not capable of doing that, but they found another way, which is to throw her into the dimensional abyss. Since then, her soul has been wandering through dimensional space. After all the difficulties she went through to reach that dimension, she will not lose the chance to recreate her physical body. Back at the Hero Association headquarters, the redhead still could not understand anything, thinking that all of this was very strange, because the Forest King did not disappear for no reason in the middle of all that chaos. Because of that, it is inevitable that they omitted some information. The secretary, who is carefully observing the details, notices something. She calls Tina and says that maybe she has found the person who defeated the Forest King. Someone took a photo of Shining at the scene and he must have eliminated that monster. Tina is happy, saying that she had already said that guy was really good. The secretary asks if Tina has ever seen Shining's face, because she is curious to see what he really looks like. Tina explains that the personal information of S-rank heroes is top secret, and not even she has access to such things. However, she heard that he is a handsome guy. The prize money he earns is always donated to schools for the non-awakened, so besides being handsome, he is also very kind. Tina tells her secretary that she is sure the two of them would make a very good match, and asks if she would like to be introduced to him. The secretary gets embarrassed and asks Tina not to tease her. Suddenly, she notices that Xingxuan is on the list of victims provided by her rescue team. Tina becomes worried, asking what she was doing there. Her secretary says that the record shows she was discharged from the hospital and went home. Tina is relieved because if this had reached the president's ears, she would be furious to know that this happened. A short time later, the protagonist's sister returns home and asks if he has already left the hospital, but she cannot find him and keeps looking. As soon as she opens the bedroom door, she realizes that he is cultivating. She is surprised and happy, saying that apparently he is managing to awaken his powers. Xuantian smiles and says that it is more or less like that. However, he thinks that telling her the truth about cultivation would be too shocking, so he prefers to leave things as they are. His sister approaches, saying that apparently the reason his hair became like that is because he awakened his powers. Xuantian laughs and agrees, telling her that his hair ended up getting very long, and asks his sister if she would like to cut it. Excited, she says yes and runs off to get the tools. A short time later, while cutting his hair, she emphasizes that now that he also has superpowers, they no longer need to stay in the current school so he can go to the awakened school tomorrow. He asks his sister to calm down a little because she is rushing too much. With shining eyes, she says that this is very obvious, because the sooner he goes, the better, since the security there is very good and the two of them will be a little closer. That way, she can be there if anything happens to him, since she does not want to go through what she went through today again. The protagonist ends up agreeing, saying that he will listen to her and change schools. Suddenly, someone appears, asking where Sixizi, the famous goddess, is, because that dimension is truly enormous. So how could he find her? He is an immortal celestial named Taibai Xingjun. He remembers everything that happened and thinks that damned traitor deserves to die, because how could someone as beautiful and elegant as Zixizi not be worthy of being the Lady of the Heavens? I will call Alma Yixizi from now on. and when he manages to bring her back, he will do the same to that traitor and send him to the Nile 100,000 times. Suddenly, he looks at the compass and it starts working. He becomes emotional and happy because apparently Zixizi is in that city, since he has been traveling for so many days that he can barely count them. On Wudang Mountain, inside the Taoist temple, Qingmeng starts waking up and, with a weak voice, asks why she's back home. Her father says that she has finally woken up. Worried, Qingmeng asks her father what happened to the boy who was with her. Zhao Shu asks how she still has the audacity to ask that, because they have stayed away from the world for so many years, and because of her, they were almost discovered. Qingmeng apologizes to her father, saying that she was wrong. Her father slams the teacup on the table, saying that it is very good that she has understood her mistake because she must not make contact with strangers in the future. He says that the boy was saved by the rescue team and that she does not need to worry about that. Besides, he has also already retrieved the ancient painting she lent out. This time, she will have to draw 100 talismans in seclusion as punishment. Qingmeng understands the situation and accepts her punishment. The protagonist was brushing his teeth and thinks that the world has never been fair. Some people born into hero families have two abilities, while there are people like him, born without parents and without superpowers. He used to be obsessed with chasing after heroes, while wondering if he could also awaken superpowers and maybe get closer to them. But now, he no longer dreams like that. With the help of the immortal cultivation method, the chance he had longed for has finally come to him. As soon as he arrives at the new school, he is impressed, because everyone there has superpowers. With a smile on his face, he thinks that he needs to say goodbye to his old classmates, but they do not need to worry because he will still visit them sometimes. He walks a little and sees a room in front of him, thinking that maybe this is the place where freshmen take their tests. The protagonist gets in line and the examiner explains that all freshmen need to take the test first to see their superpowers using that equipment. The protagonist becomes worried because if that is equipment for testing powers, then he does not know if it will be able to detect his cultivation. Meanwhile, in a flying car, Xingxuan's mother was telling her daughter that she had trusted Dr. Saimu to study the matter of restoring her powers, so she does not need to cause trouble in the meantime. Xingxuan tells her mother not to worry and says that what happened yesterday was only an accident, that she is almost there and will talk to her later. As soon as she arrives, several people gather beside the car. She steps out and greets everyone, telling them to have a great day. All the men are enchanted by her because, besides being beautiful, her academic performance is incredible, and that is what is expected from an honor student. Wang Zirui, the son of the richest man, tells everyone to get out of his way so they do not block his view. He looks at her, saying that she is indeed the woman he desires, and that when he inherits his father's property, he will definitely add her to his harem. A short time later, the protagonist leaves the testing room, saying that it is finally over, and now he only needs to wait for the results. But he is surprised to see the girl he met in the forest, so he goes over to say hello. Zirui notices this and says that apparently that boy is stalking Xingxuan. He asks one of his henchmen to stop the protagonist immediately. The boy uses a water ability and traps the protagonist inside a bubble. He's surprised, asking what is happening there. He asks Zirui who he is and why he is using his powers. Zirui orders his henchmen to put the protagonist down and emphasizes that the protagonist actually has the guts to go after his future wife. Xuantian gets a little lost and asks who this so-called future wife is supposed to be. The other little lackey shouts at the protagonist, saying that it is the girl he was chasing earlier because everyone in that school knows that their leader likes her. Xuantian asks what that has to do with anything, questioning if they really think he cares about that one-sided love. He thinks that he has finally managed to find out that girl's name. The same boy from before asks the protagonist how he dares talk to the leader like that, because he is the son of the richest person in that place, and Xingxuan is the daughter of the president of the Hero Association. They are basically a perfect match. Zirui starts laughing and says that his follower said something very interesting. Then he gives him some money, making the poor idiot happy. The young man continues acting arrogantly, telling the protagonist to apologize to the leader and promise never to go near her again. But Xuantian asks what will happen if he does not do that. All of them begin releasing their powers, saying that they will make him suffer a lot. The people notice it, saying that there is an idiot challenging the richest boy in that school and that apparently he is a transfer freshman. But no one knows yet what powers he has to be so confident. Zirui tells the three of them to go beat up the protagonist, and whoever manages to defeat him will go with him to his father's mansion. The young men hear this and get excited, because they heard that all the girls there are beautiful. Gigi tries to attack first, but the other boy with wings charges forward, saying that he will be the one to defeat the protagonist. Xuantian realizes that Gigi was the one who trapped him in the water. The three continue attacking, but the protagonist dodges the attacks and thinks that ever since he absorbed a bit of spiritual energy, his body has become much lighter, and his movements have become more agile. So maybe this is the power of cultivation. However, he had been distracted by the attacks, and the flying boy ends up grabbing him and throwing him hard onto the ground. Xuantian gets up, thinking that he did well to protect his body with spiritual energy, because otherwise he would have fractured bones all over his body. The boy who had thrown the protagonist is surprised, asking how he came out unharmed because that should be impossible. Zerui is also surprised, thinking that he has not seen the protagonist use any superpower so far. However, he is extremely agile and has great speed. He is completely fine even after being smashed into the ground. So maybe he has some kind of body-strengthening superpower or something like that. Zeke CZ praises the protagonist, saying that his use of spiritual energy was not bad and that apparently he can learn things quickly. Xuantian gets excited and tells his master that this is a great opportunity for him to see if his cultivation is much better than those boys' superpowers. The goddess realizes that all this mess is because of superpowers and thinks that she will take this chance to teach him the difference between cultivation and superpowers. She asks if the protagonist can see the things they are releasing from their bodies, because he needs to try to feel them exactly as he felt the spiritual energy and try to control them. Xuantian says that he understands and that he will try to do it. He asks the three fools to hurry up and come at him all at once, because he does not want to waste too much time. They get irritated and charge at him, saying that he will deeply regret saying that. But the protagonist carefully analyzes each movement and tries to control them, creating a huge sphere of water and trapping the three of them inside. Gigi gets confused, saying that those superpowers were his. So how is it possible that the protagonist is using them? Xuantian gets excited but asks his master what just happened. She explains that this is the difference between cultivation and superpowers. Superpowers work by using the energy of the body to affect the environment, just like a magnet attracting metal. On the other hand, cultivation works by using one's consciousness to control the things around them, making them become part of the cultivator. Xuantian is impressed, saying that this is incredible, because if that is true, then it means he can be invincible. Sixizi says that it is not quite like that because materializing his consciousness requires a lot of spiritual energy, and right now, the protagonist's spiritual reserve is not very large, so the things he can control are still very limited. He smiles, saying that he will keep training as much as he can, but at least this is already enough to defeat those three idiots. He looks at Zerui and asks if he wants to keep fighting. The students ask who the protagonist is because that was incredible. A newcomer defeating all three of them at once is something unheard of. Another boy says that he has heard of something like this before and that the protagonist is probably the secret son of some S-rank superhero. Zerui becomes furious and admits that the protagonist is quite strong, but still advises him to apologize immediately and give up trying to get close to Xingxuan. Otherwise, he will regret going to that school. Zerui thinks that it does not matter what the protagonist's powers are because all of them will be useless before his eyes of the future. But Xuantian prepares to fight and says that there is a time to wake up, a time to eat, and a time to sleep. But when it comes to fighting, any time is the right time for him. Before the two can start fighting, Xingxuan shouts for both of them to stop immediately and emphasizes that fights involving superpowers are not allowed on school grounds, and all of them will go with her to the student council. But as soon as she sees the protagonist, she is surprised, thinking that he does not have superpowers, so how did he enter that school and manage to get into a fight? She points at Zerui, saying that according to the school rules, bullying people without superpowers is also not allowed, so he only needs to wait because his parents will be called soon. Zerui gets scared and asks her to wait a moment, saying that it is impossible for that boy not to have superpowers. The protagonist runs over to her and laughs, saying that he is right, because he managed to awaken superpowers. Besides, he has just arrived at that school and is still not familiar with the rules, so he would like to politely ask her to ignore this just this once. Xingxuan is surprised, asking if he really just arrived, because if that is true, then it is fine for her to let it go for now. But they need to make sure this does not happen again. However, she thinks that the protagonist knows she had lost her superpowers, so she needs to find a way to keep him quiet. She orders Zerui and his group of followers to go to the student council immediately. She smiles and holds the protagonist's hand, saying that he needs to follow her. The two begin running through the school and Xuantian gets a little confused, asking where she is taking him. Xingxuan explains that the protagonist has just arrived, so he is still not familiar with that school, which is why she would like to show him around. They go to the club activity room and she closes the door. Xuantian asks what she is doing because she had said they were going to get to know the place. She moves closer and places her hand on the wall, saying that they can do that later, because right now there is something more important to do. The protagonist looks at her attributes and gets embarrassed, asking what is more important and what she wants to do with him. She realizes that it was also going in a different direction and feels embarrassed, saying that it is nothing obscene. She only wanted the protagonist to keep everything that happened in the forest a secret. Schwantian gets confused asking why she wants that since she was great there, so it would be better if many people knew what happened. She shouts, saying no. He realizes that apparently she likes to be discreet and says that he understands. Suddenly, a boy bursts through the door, saying that he has arrived. This makes the protagonist lose his balance. He places his hands on something very soft and accidentally kisses her. The green-haired young man asks where his classmates are, but when he looks to the side, he sees that scene, gets embarrassed, and runs away apologizing. He thinks that the most beautiful and coveted girl in that school was making out with a man, that this is huge news, and that he needs to tell everyone. Embarrassed, Xingxuan asks the protagonist to get off her already. He also gets embarrassed and apologizes, saying that he did not do that on purpose. She emphasizes that he cannot tell anyone what just happened there because if he does, then she will beat him up. Besides, she thinks that she cannot let the guy who ran away tell anyone about this. The protagonist remains frozen, not knowing what to do, because what happened was something extremely good. Xingxuan manages to catch up with the green-haired guy and irritated traps him in water, ordering him to come back immediately. She orders him to forget everything he saw. He gets scared and asks her to spare his life, saying that he will forget immediately. Meanwhile, in the student council room, a man apologizes to young master Zirui, saying that they were only following orders and asks him to forgive them. Zirui says that the young man is very sensible, so it is all right. The man says that if young master needs anything in the future, he only needs to say the word. Zirui asks if there is any way for the student council to get the list of those who took the test today. The man says yes, because the student council management system and the teaching system are connected so they can take a look. But as soon as they look at the protagonist's score, they realize that it is S. Zirui questions how that is possible because either something is wrong with the machine or the protagonist cheated. Gigi says that if he really is that rank, then the protagonist will be assigned to Xingxuan's class. Zirui becomes furious at this and asks the young man if there is any way to manipulate the numbers, because he does not want to see that annoying boy inside the school. The young man says no, because the student council can only view the data but cannot modify anything. Zirui thinks that this does not matter because there are many ways to get him out of that school. Somewhere else, in the middle of the city, the A-rank superheroine Kanglin confirms the target, an S-rank wanted criminal, Stark. He was standing alone saying that the smell of peace is disgusting, and because of that, he wants to destroy everything all the time. However, he tries to calm himself down, saying that he needs to restrain himself because he has more important things to do at that moment. Suddenly, he senses a presence, which means that he is being followed. A taxi driver stops in front of him and asks if he needs a taxi. Stark touches the taxi and eliminates the driver, saying that he is not worthy of even saying a single word in his presence, so he needs to learn his place. People begin to notice and ask what that guy is doing. Kanglin runs over to them and asks them to make way, but as soon as she arrives, Stark had already disappeared, and only the driver was dead inside the car. She becomes irritated, saying that he disappeared again, but Stark was watching her with fury in his eyes, because a mere A-rank superheroine dared to try to capture him. Meanwhile, inside his room, Schwantian had just received the results of the admission test and was placed in Class A. He says that his sister Yunshu will be happy to see this when she comes back. However, he decides to use that time alone to practice, because he needs to enter the Qi training stage. He concentrates but finds something a little strange and questions why he cannot feel any spiritual energy. Sixizi explains to him that the spiritual energy there is very weak. When he practiced yesterday, he absorbed all the spiritual energy nearby. So, if he wants to practice, he needs to go to a place where the natural environment is well preserved, like a forest. He is surprised, asking if absorbing spiritual energy really is that troublesome. The goddess explains that part of the spiritual energy he absorbed yesterday was collected by her in the forest because she was afraid he would think it was too difficult and give up. This makes the protagonist a little unhappy because he was tricked. Suddenly, someone starts knocking on his door. He finds it strange since his sister is still working, so he does not know who it could be. Xingjun was at the door saying that Sixizi is inside. The protagonist opens the door asking how he can help. Xingjun leaps forward and hugs the protagonist, crying and saying that he finally managed to find her. Schwantian gets confused and tries to push Xingjun away, but he keeps saying that it was very difficult to find her. The protagonist gets irritated and kicks him in the face, saying that he had already asked to be let go. The goddess appears, saying that no wonder the voice sounded so familiar. She says that he is Taibai Xingjun and asks what he is doing there. The protagonist asks his master if he is someone she knows. With a slightly surprised smile, she says yes. Xingjun, still crying, says that he finally managed to find her. Sixizi asks him to stop crying because now that he is there, he can answer whether he knows where her body is and if there is a way for her to return. Xingjun explains that he bribed the deity Beauty and had her secretly help him open the portal. Then he was in such a hurry to go to that planet to help her that he forgot to think about how to go back. Sixizi gets irritated, saying that he is an idiot because there is no point in the two of them meeting if they have no way to return. Xingjun tells her not to worry because her spirit has merged with that boy's, so her body can only be reconstructed through him. Because of that, he will help and provide all the pills he needs to cultivate to immortality. Sixizi becomes a little happier because with those pills, the protagonist can really speed up his cultivation a lot. Xuantian, still lost in the situation, asks why the two of them are looking at each other without saying anything. Xingjun tells the protagonist that his house seems quite big. The protagonist asks what he means by that. Xingjun says that from today on, they will be a family, but Xuantian throws him outside and says that he cannot stay in his house. Xingjun knocks on the door and asks the protagonist to wait a moment, because he can provide all kinds of pills he needs to cultivate immortality. Zixizi questions why the protagonist will not let him stay there, since Xingjun can make all kinds of immortality pills and will be of great benefit to his cultivation. The protagonist says that this is not a social welfare home. Besides, his sister will not agree to it. Xingjun keeps knocking on the door and tells the protagonist that with his current cultivation rate, it will take him at least a year and a half to reach the Qi training stage. But he has a pill there, and if he takes it, he will reach the stage immediately. In addition, he also has a robe that is one of the best treasures in heaven, and he can have all those things if he lets him stay inside the house. Xuantian becomes a little more interested and opens the door, asking if all of that is true. Xingjun gives his word, saying that he would never lie about such a thing. The protagonist thinks that he does not know when he will be able to reach the Qi training stage on his own, so that pill is truly tempting. He takes the robe and the pill and closes the door again, saying that he will keep them. Shixiji says that the protagonist took the pill and the treasure, but kicked Xingjun out again. Xuantian explains that it is because his face was very ugly, so he needs to stay outside for a while. An hour later, Xingjun enters the house and the protagonist says that it is fine and that he will sleep on the floor of his room, but he must stay in his room or in the living room. Besides, he is absolutely not allowed to go near Yunshu or her room. Xingjun says that it is fine and asks him to calm down because everything was already very clear. The protagonist looks at the pill and asks if it is really any good. Xingjun takes advantage of this and says that he has not bathed in days, so he will use the bathroom first. Xuantian prepares to take the pill, however, the goddess asks him to wait a minute. She explains that this immortality pill will not work there. He needs to go to the forest. Only with the support of its spiritual energy will he be able to maximize his potential. Xuantian explains that at that time there will be no bus available to go to the forest, and paying for a taxi there is very expensive. Sixizi holds his face and says that this will be easy to solve because she will teach him a footwork technique. It allows him to fly through the air and he only needs to follow the method to reach the rooftop. As soon as they go to the rooftop, the protagonist asks if she is sure that he will be able to fly. The goddess says that as long as he follows the formula she just taught him, there will be no problem. He concentrates, tries to fly, and actually succeeds. Sixizi says that they need to be quick because his sister will come back at 10 o'clock, so they cannot waste time. A short time later, they arrive in the middle of the forest, and she says that this place has a lot of spiritual energy so he can consume the pill there. She emphasizes that this pill was refined with divine power and is not as complex as ordinary pills. He can absorb it without worrying about affecting his foundation. The trick to refining the pill is to use spiritual energy to catalyze the energy inside it. He has to catalyze the spiritual energy to activate the pill and convert as much of its energy as possible. The more he absorbs within a certain period of time, the better it will be. Xuantian concentrates as much as possible, however. He begins to feel an intense heat because the pill's energy is spreading through his body, and every refined bit is increasing his body's strength. Suddenly, he enters a subspace again and asks what the sphere in front of him is. Sixizi explains that inside that sphere is the monster he had previously absorbed, and now he can try to refine it with spiritual energy. The Forest King was furious, asking what place that was and ordering someone to get him out of there immediately. Suddenly, he begins to be surrounded by a strange energy and questions what is happening. The protagonist manages to absorb him perfectly, and a column of energy begins to rise from his body. The goddess congratulates him because he has finally entered the Qi training stage. Meanwhile, at the site of the battle with the Forest King, Stark observes the area and says that there is definitely something wrong with the Hero Association's information. Judging by the level of the fight, there should be remains of the Forest King. Only the power of the special system could make the Forest King disappear without leaving any traces. And without the Forest King's remains, the organization's plan has been delayed again. Suddenly, he sees the column of energy coming out of the protagonist and is surprised, saying that there is a human nearby. He goes over there and realizes that he was right. He charges in with everything, saying that he failed to complete his mission, so he will have some fun attacking that guy for a bit. But the protagonist senses someone's presence and slaps Stark across the face, throwing him far away with great force. He is surprised, asking what that was, who that guy is, and why he was attacked out of nowhere. However, he is quite happy since the power of his strike was much stronger than before. Stark asks who that guy is because he seems weaker than a C-rank hero, and yet he was able to injure him. Irritated by this, he attacks again, saying that he will finish that boy immediately. But the protagonist manages to dodge the attack again, asking who Stark is and why he is attacking him. Stark tries to attack again, saying that inferior creatures do not deserve to know his name, but the protagonist dodges again. Stark accelerates quickly, thinking that he underestimated that boy, but now he will have to show his true speed. Schwantian starts being overwhelmed in the fight, and questions how that guy suddenly became so strong. Stark appears behind the protagonist and lands a very powerful kick, throwing him against a rock, asking if that is all he has. Schwantian calls his master, saying that he was winning easily before, and questions why it is so difficult to defend himself now. Sixiji explains that when the protagonist reached the Chi training stage, he activated a bit of the resonance of the power of heaven and earth, and that is why he became so strong. However, that resonance has already ended now. Schwantian understands and asks his master if she could teach him a bit of combat magic, otherwise he will not be able to defeat that guy. The goddess says that it may be too complicated for him to learn in a single minute, but she has an idea, saying that she once developed a magical art that might be suitable for him now. Schwantian asks what kind of magic it is. His master approaches him and kisses him on the head. She explains that this technique is called cloud-piercing finger. It allows him to instantly gather the energy around him and release it to produce a powerful destructive force. She transmitted the entire method of using it into the protagonist's mind and asks if he managed to understand. Embarrassed, he says yes. Stark starts flying and says that the protagonist has disappointed him greatly, so he will end this fight now. But Schwantian uses the destructive finger, saying that the one who will be killed there is Stark. The two attacks collide, but the protagonist easily gains the advantage and hits Stark, completely destroying him. The power was so strong that it left planet Earth, causing massive devastation in the clouds and atmosphere. He is impressed, seeing that this magic is extremely powerful. His master is happy and hugs him, saying that he did a great job, but the protagonist asks her to let go because he cannot breathe. Suddenly his phone rings and he sees that it is already 11 o'clock at night. He gets worried, saying that it is already late and he needs to go back immediately. Meanwhile, inside the house, Yunshu was playing cards with Xingjun and celebrates, saying that she won again. Xingjun says that mortals have advantages in playing games they invented. However, now he has already understood everything and wants to play again. Yunshu starts shuffling, saying that even so, she will win again. The protagonist says that he will join this round but feels relieved, thinking that apparently the two of them got along well. Yunshu goes over to the protagonist and says that his friend is very stupid because she has already beaten him many times. Schwantian apologizes to his sister, saying that he forgot to discuss it with her first, and says that this guy will stay with them for a while, asking if there is any problem. Yunshu smiles and says that it is fine because if he is her brother's friend, then there is no problem. She thinks that this is the first time her brother has invited a friend into that house, so she needs to support him. Xingjun thanks Schwantian for letting him stay there. The protagonist sees that he is wearing his father's clothes and thinks that his mother and father's room has been locked for so long that this feeling is a little strange. Somewhere in the Western Sea, two people were talking about how recovering Stark had failed. The boss says that this location is the headquarters of the Hero Association, but the mission is not difficult because they only need to recover the remains, and he questions what is happening. The woman explains that her superpower is the Tree of Life, so she can confirm the condition and location of anyone who has swallowed the seed of her power. However, now she has completely lost Stark's life signs. The boss gets irritated, shouting that the members of the Hero Association have ruined everything again. He asks for this to be sent to the King of the Deep Sea. It is time for them to know what happens when they get in the way of their plans. The next day, inside the school, the girls from Class A were talking. One of them says that she heard there will be a new student that day and asks if anyone knows who he is. Another girl says that she knows because she was there the day before, and he is very handsome. Besides, he could easily defeat 5 guys at once. She emphasizes that this is not all because she also heard from the rumors that he ranked first in yesterday's freshman tests. The other girl is impressed to know that a handsome and strong guy will join their class, so she needs to try to win him over. The pink-haired girl tells her friend to forget it and says that the protagonist is already with Xingxuan because she saw the two of them holding hands yesterday, and they seemed very close. Another girl hears the conversation and thinks that apparently Xingxuan has feelings for this boy, and he is a powerful person. So how could she let such a good opportunity pass? She needs to take from Xingxuan everything she wants to have. A short time later, the protagonist enters the classroom and the teacher announces that today they will have a newly arrived student who transferred into Class A. His name is Zhou Xuantian. He introduces himself to everyone and emphasizes that he will definitely become an S-rank hero. Xingxuan's eyes shine, thinking that the protagonist is very ambitious. However, becoming a hero of that rank will not be that easy. The teacher tells him that there is an empty seat beside Xingxuan and that he can sit there. Another boy looks at the protagonist and questions whether he really has superpowers because his spirit does not feel anything coming from him. Another teacher takes over the class, saying that that day's lesson is about real combat practice. She says that Xingxuan has the best grades in this subject, so she needs to help the new student. The other female student raises her hand, telling the teacher that she also wants to learn more about the new student and asks if she can join them. She thinks that she will steal the protagonist right in front of Xingxuan. The teacher says that it is fine and lets her join the two of them. The boys start asking who that boy is and why the two most beautiful girls in that class want to join him. Zirui gets irritated when he sees that guy at the center of attention again, so he needs to teach him a lesson. The teacher asks everyone to prepare to go to the battlefield. A short time later, they go to the combat field, and the teacher asks everyone to take their positions. Xuantian gets worried because spiritual energy is scarce in that place. Besides, he does not know if he can use the cloud-piercing finger there. The girl from before clings to the protagonist and greets him, but he is surprised and asks who she is. The girl introduces herself, saying that she is Xia Jiki, and that it is a pleasure to meet him. She emphasizes that he was very cool the day before because she was watching everything. Xuantian smiles and says that he is flattered to receive so many compliments. But Xingxuan interrupts their conversation and tells the protagonist not to believe that hussy, since she did not even go to school the day before. Jiki asks why Xingxuan is slandering her and emphasizes that Xuantian needs to believe her words. But Xingxuan grabs the protagonist's other arm and tells that woman to get away because she will not let the protagonist be deceived. The atmosphere heats up between the two of them and they ask who he is going to believe. He does not know what to answer, but the teacher approaches, saying that the exercise will begin soon and that they need to prepare. He feels relieved because, thanks to the teacher, he managed to escape that situation. Suddenly, the room starts flashing, and Xingxuan asks what kind of monster they're going to fight. Jiki explains that the monsters are random, and each team deals with a different monster. Suddenly, the C-rank Frostthorn octopus appears with the abilities of freezing, illusion, and regeneration. Xingxuan complains, saying that it is the monster she hates the most. The octopus starts attacking, but they manage to dodge the first attack. The protagonist says that he will try and uses the cloud-piercing finger, but it basically does nothing against the octopus, leaving the two girls a little surprised by that. The monster becomes even more furious and starts attacking with greater intensity. Xingxuan warns that the tentacles are annoying and powerful. The protagonist begins advancing at high speed, saying that if the cloud-piercing finger cannot be used, then he will have to choose close combat. He manages to cut off one of the monster's tentacles, but Xingxuan says that the protagonist is being very foolish and asks if he does not know that it is forbidden to cut or try to injure the Frostthorn octopus, because that is common sense in monster science. Suddenly, a large amount of fog is released, and the protagonist asks if more tentacles are approaching. Xingxuan manages to save him and explains that as soon as the tentacles are amputated, it will activate its fog ability, making it even harder to attack it again. But several other monsters also appear. Jiki passes by him and says that it was a great attack, however, he cannot repeat it again. She emphasizes that time is limited, so they can leave that to her. She activates Assassin Shadow mode and starts attacking at great speed, saying that by attacking the octopus's weak points, those injuries will soon disappear. Xuantian is impressed, seeing that she is very good. Jiki finally manages to find the real one and attacks its eye, but she is tricked and lured into another illusion. Suddenly, she is trapped by the tentacles. But Xingxuan manages to use her explosions to free her. A warning is issued, saying that only 30 seconds remain until the end of the exercise, so they need to hurry. The protagonist gets confused and says that she had said they could not attack the tentacles, but now she is exploding all of them. Xingxuan explains that the monster's fog ability has already been activated, so the situation could not get any worse than it already is because it is already about to explode. She emphasizes that its weakness is the eye. If they destroy the core in the eye, that monster will die, but They do not have time to search for the real one, so there is no other alternative but to explode all of them. However, the explosions were not effective either. Suddenly, more tentacles head toward them, and the three of them end up being caught. Jiki shouts that it is impossible and asks how the octopus grew so much, because it was using illusion abilities to make them underestimate its strength when it first appeared. There were only 10 seconds left until the end of the exercise, and Xingxuan says that this time they will fail. However, the protagonist cuts all the tentacles around him and tells them not to lose heart because that much time is enough. The night before, while returning home, Xuantian asked his master if the cloud-piercing finger requires him to use his own spiritual power to channel the energy of heaven and earth into a single line. Because of that, he needs to ask what happens if there is a shortage of spiritual power between heaven and earth. She explains that using his own spiritual power to channel the energy of heaven and earth when casting spells not only allows him to maximize the preservation of his own spiritual power, but also grants him great power, just like he did with that guy. Considering his current strength, by using the power of heaven and earth, he is able to obtain power equivalent to that of an S-rank superhero. However, when executing that move, the surrounding energy will be consumed, which makes it difficult to recover in the short term. When there is a shortage of the spiritual power of heaven and earth, or when that power is non-existent, it is necessary to rely entirely on his own spiritual power to perform magic. However, this method significantly consumes his own spiritual power, leading to a reduction in his power. Because of that, he should only use it when it is truly necessary. Using the cloud-piercing finger through his own spiritual power should be equivalent to the full power of an A-rank hero. Back in the present, the protagonist concentrates and says that playtime is over now, and he will show everyone what he is truly capable of. He uses the cloud-piercing finger, easily destroying the tentacles and the octopus's core. He thinks that temporarily he may have become a C-rank hero now, but after that attack, his spiritual energy was almost completely exhausted. However, that attack not only destroyed the monster, but also caused a hole in the combat field. The other students are impressed, asking what power that is, because it is certainly the power of an A-rank hero. Xingxuan hugs the protagonist, saying that it was incredible because he managed to defeat the monster with a single move. Jiki, also impressed, says that apparently he had been hiding his true power from the very beginning. As soon as the other people gather, the announcement is issued saying that the exercise has been completed and that they can go to the other area. The students are impressed to see that Group D obtained a perfect score because the newcomer was very lucky. Besides having two beautiful girls accompanying him, he also managed to get a perfect score. Zerui goes over to the protagonist and says that he was just lucky, but the protagonist says that his envy is very sharp and that he needs to be a little careful if he does not want to cut himself. Zerui emphasizes that they still have not finished their fight, so he asks if the protagonist would like to reschedule it for 3 days from now. And if the protagonist loses, he needs to leave the school forever. Xuantian asks what happens if he wins. Zerui says that he will kneel and call him father 3 times. Meanwhile, at her house, Kanglin was watching the news. The news said that last night, a strange light suddenly appeared in the forest and many citizens shared photos of the incident on the internet. Some internet users speculate that this may be related to the Forest King's attack, so today they invited renowned scientists to debate the matter. Kanglin thinks that it might be what she is thinking. She calls Molong and says that she needs him to investigate whether any major incidents occurred in some of the cities where Stark had been in recent months. She gets up because she needs to personally check the forest. While driving to the site of the incident, she receives the news that Molong has already obtained the results, and all the cities Stark passed through were targeted by S-rank monster attacks. And all those attacks occurred before his arrival. She thinks that apparently she was right and that Guy is part of Cthulhu, an organization dedicated to the fusion of humans and monsters. They are probably after the Forest King's remains, and there must be some clue. The protagonist returns home and complains to his master, saying that there are many limitations associated with using the cloud-piercing finger, and asks if there is not a slightly better spell to use. She emphasizes that there is no quick solution for cultivating immortality. When he reaches the foundation building stage and accumulates more spiritual energy in his body, this problem will no longer exist. Xuantian goes to Xingjun, who helped him break through last time, because he would like to get a little more. Xingjun explains that that pill should only be consumed when the user cannot progress or when they are at a lower level. On the other hand, he can offer some fire pills, which have the potential to quickly increase his magical power, as well as some Xuan Ming pills, which have the ability to heal wounds quickly. The protagonist accepts, saying that this is better than nothing. Besides, it is getting late and he had better hurry and go to the forest to absorb more spiritual energy. Meanwhile, on the way, Kanglin finds Stark and says that he's under arrest. Stark thinks that this really is not his lucky day, because when he finally managed to recover his physical body, that woman appeared. He charges forward quickly, saying that she has made him very upset, so she needs to die. She tries to block the attack, but realizes that his strength is immensely great. He throws her far away while thinking that when he meets the protagonist again, he will tear him to pieces, since that toy is not fit to play with him. Kanglin manages to get up and tries to counterattack. She uses her robot to hold Stark down. He becomes desperate because he cannot hide since he has just recovered his body and has not fully recovered his strength yet. Fortunately, it is raining, so he can use that kind of power. He attacks with a breath of deadly energy and manages to stop her attack, counterattacking at the same time. Kanglin thinks that the intelligence indicated that this man is an S-rank wanted criminal, but he only has A-rank strength. Stark manages to defeat her and starts complaining because of her, he basically had to spend all his life energy. Because of that, he needs to turn her into his food. However, he notices that someone is approaching, and maybe it could be people from the Hero Association, so it is better to retreat immediately. A short time later, the protagonist arrives, wondering why it looks like there was a fight in that place. Looking a little farther ahead, he notices that there is a woman lying on the ground, and when he checks her identification, he realizes that she is from the Hero Association. He tries to wake her up, asking if she is okay, but she does not respond. He tells his master that she is badly injured, that her pulse is weak, and that it is too late to take her to the hospital, asking what they should do. Sixizi says that he received the Xuanming pills so he can try using them. He tries to give one to her, but in the state she is in, she will not be able to swallow it on her own. He remembers a similar scene from a movie he had seen on TV and tries to do the same, passing the medicine to her from inside his mouth into hers. It works, and her injuries begin to heal. The protagonist realizes that the pill works very quickly and that it will not take long for her to fully recover. Her robot approaches and shows what really happened. Xuantian is surprised to see that guy again because he was sure he had killed him before. Apparently, he was the one who hurt that girl. The robot dog keeps barking at the protagonist, and this makes him realize that maybe the dog wants him to follow it. Meanwhile, in the middle of the forest, Meng was collecting some mushrooms, saying that her father was out of town again, so she needs to make dinner by herself. Stark manages to approach and realizes that he has found a girl without superpowers and she will be his source of energy. Meanwhile, the protagonist was running as fast as he could, following the dog, and sees a huge explosion, saying that apparently another fight is happening right there. As soon as he gets closer, he sees Meng fighting against Stark and asks what she is doing there alone. He places Kanglan on the ground and asks the robot dog to stay there and take care of her, because he will handle that situation. Meng was already being pressured in the fight, wondering who that guy is because he is very fast, so she cannot hit him. Besides, she cannot allow him to get any closer, otherwise she will be eliminated right there. Stark keeps dodging the explosions while growing increasingly irritated, wondering if that woman was not powerless, so why are the papers she throws so powerful? Besides, he thinks that he will be in serious trouble if those noises attract people from the Hero Association, so he needs to eliminate her as quickly as possible. Stark throws a tree at her, but she does not back down, thinking that she needs to deal with him alone. She explodes the tree, but that was only a distraction. He approaches quickly, saying that now this is the end of everything, but before he can touch her, she simply disappears and appears in the protagonist's arms. Xuantian prepares to use the cloud-piercing finger again, asking if Stark is ready to die for the second time. He attacks, completely destroying Stark's body again. Meng is impressed and asks if the protagonist was always that strong. He takes her down to the ground, asking if she is okay. She says yes, however, she does not know what he is doing there or how he used such a terrifying power. He emphasizes that this is a long story and asks if she still has more of those magic papers. He points to Stark's remains, saying that apparently he has the ability to regenerate, but the power he just used consumed all the spiritual energy in that place, so he needs her to use those explosives again. Meng agrees, saying that she has enough explosives to make him disappear completely. She attacks again, causing huge explosions. Xuantian says that now it should probably be fine. She thanks him, saying that he saved her life. Xuantian says that he is only doing his part because she saved his life before, so now they are even. He asks if she lives in that forest. Meng explains that her family has lived there for generations, in the Taoist temple, so she can take him to her home. As the two of them walk, she says that she still does not know the protagonist's name and introduces herself, saying that her name is Dongfang Meng. Xuantian also introduces himself, apologizing for not saying it earlier. Meng says that it is fine and asks what he is doing there and why that strange guy was also attacking her. The protagonist takes a deep breath, saying that once again, it is a long story to tell, but suddenly he remembers that he was almost forgetting the other girl. He runs back saying that he just remembered something important and asks her to wait there because he will be right back. Meanwhile, at the deep sea base, the television news was reporting that recently, passenger ships near Mirage have often been attacked by mutant monsters. Among them, there are many monsters classified above A rank, and the Hero Association has sent a team led by Dongxia to handle the situation. The girl from before is happy with this news, saying that this is very good because now they only need to wait until they arrive. The other man asks her if that means the material she sent there really works. She says yes, but tells him that he cannot kill the S-rank heroes because the boss plans to keep them alive to extract their powers. The man smiles and tells her not to worry because he promises to leave them alive. She leaves the room saying that she needs to go now because in a few days she will check the results. Xuantian reaches Kanglin, and she was already standing, saying that she was waiting for him. The protagonist asks if she is okay. Embarrassed, she says yes, emphasizing that he not only healed her wounds, but also completed the objective of her task, and she remembers the kiss he had given her. Xuantian gets a little embarrassed, asking if she really managed to remember everything. She explains that her robot dog had recorded everything that happened, and praises the protagonist, saying that he is very strong. She asks if he is some new hero from the Hero Association, and also asks about that other girl. Xuantian starts laughing, saying that he is not a hero, because he is still only 16 years old and is studying at Mirage City's superhero school. This leaves her impressed and astonished, asking if he is really just a student, since he just eliminated an S-rank wanted criminal. And on top of that, he is only 16 years old. This makes her ask why he does not join the Hero Association. The protagonist, still embarrassed, asks if she can keep this a secret because he wants to learn more at the hero school, and because of that, he sincerely asks her not to tell anyone about that girl. He thinks that his temporary strength is only C rank, so he cannot join the association right away. Kanglin ends up agreeing, saying that extremely powerful people like him always have their own peculiarities. She introduces herself, saying her name and that she is A rank. She gives him something, telling him to keep it. And if he needs anything, he can feel free to call her because she will be available to help him. She says goodbye to the protagonist, asking him to go back to his girlfriend. He gets embarrassed again and tries to explain, saying that she is not his girlfriend. A short time later on Wudang Mountain at the Taoist temple, the protagonist enters saying that the place is incredible and asks why he cannot see any of those buildings from the outside. Qingmeng explains that there is a special prohibition talisman there so other people cannot see it. The protagonist looks at the talisman and tells his master that it is radiating spiritual energy and that he feels it is similar to the magic he learned. Sixizi says that he is correct. The magic contained in the paper talisman is a branch of immortality. She emphasizes that she previously observed that Qing Meng can only use paper talismans and does not have knowledge of magical arts. And apparently, there is a possibility that other powerful immortals appeared in that world and taught these things to those people. Fiery, who was sitting inside, says that after a long wait, someone has finally returned because he thought no one lived there anymore. He approaches Qingmeng, saying that she must be the one he is looking for. She draws her sword and prepares to fight, asking who he is and how he managed to break through the prohibition talisman and get there. Fiery asks her to calm down and explains that he was taught how to pass through the prohibition talisman because he is only there to deliver a message. He hands over a letter saying that her brother, Dongfang Yunshuo, asked him to deliver it to her. Qingmeng holds the letter, a little confused. Fiery says goodbye, saying that he has already finished what he came there to do, so he had better leave. But Qingmeng asks him to wait a moment and asks if he really is her brother's friend. Then asks how her brother is doing now. But Fiery laughs, saying that it is not exactly a friendship because he has been treated like a servant for a long time. Besides, he emphasizes that he does not know much about her brother since it has been quite a while since the two of them last saw each other and he simply disappears. Xuantian is surprised to find out that she has a brother. She says yes, but explains that she has not heard from him since he left home a few years ago. She calls the protagonist inside for a while. The two go into a room and sit down to talk. As soon as she takes out what was inside her brother's letter, she realizes that it seems to be a special talisman and is completely different from any she has ever seen. Suddenly, someone calls for hers, and she becomes completely terrified, saying that her father has just arrived and that he does not allow her to talk to strangers. If he finds the protagonist there, things will get serious. He thinks about what could happen with an angry father seeing a boy alone with his daughter. Qingmeng tells him that he can leave through the other side. He says that it is fine, but he needs at least 1 second. He writes on a piece of paper and gives it to her, saying that this is his contact number, and that if she has any problems in the future, she only needs to contact him and he will solve them. The protagonist runs away and she feels happy, thinking that apparently she has made a new friend. Zhao Shu enters the house and asks his daughter what she is looking at. She hides the paper and says that it is nothing, that she was only thinking about some things. The next day, inside the superhero school, the teacher says that they chose the combat department because they want to become heroes. And next, she will go into more detail about superpowers. She begins explaining that according to general theory, superpowers are divided into the psychokinesis system, the enhancement system, and the special system. The psychokinesis system is the manipulation of various things through willpower, including the elemental system. The enhancement system strengthens oneself or others, and the special system is any other system that does not belong to the first two. She asks Xingxuan to show psychokinesis to everyone. Xingxuan goes to the front and explains that psychokinesis is the ability to control the things around oneself through one's own will. She says that she will give an example and says that she will distribute all the articles on the desks. However, silence fills the classroom and nothing happens. She becomes worried, asking herself why it is not working. The protagonist also notices and wonders why it is not working, and maybe her bracelet is not working at that moment. But Xingxuan insists and orders the things to start levitating. Suddenly, the notebooks, pencils, and everything else begin to float. However, she is still confused and wonders why they are floating, because she does not feel that her power is being used. The truth is that the protagonist was silently giving her a little help. She realizes this and sees that he is secretly doing all of it. Around the school, she was alone, and still not understanding what was happening, decides to check with her mother. The Water Witch answers and asks her daughter if everything is all right. She explains to her mother that her bracelet simply stopped working, and her father is on a mission in the nearby waters, so she asks if he is okay. Her mother explains that he is currently at the bottom of the ocean, and maybe the underwater environment is affecting the signal, and asks her to relax because he is an S-rank superhero. Tina enters the room and stays silent while the president continues explaining to her daughter that her bracelet is activated based on her power, which in turn is affected by the environment. Xingxuan says that it is fine and that apparently she will have to wait until he returns from the mission and asks her mother to tell her father to be careful. As soon as they hang up, the president tells Tina that they need to keep the fact that Dongxia was captured a secret and arrange the rescue immediately. 1 hour earlier in the city's maritime area, Dongxia was fighting against one of the members of that organization. The Horned Man says that they are in the ocean and that there he becomes invincible. He advances quickly and starts clashing blows with Dongxia, who feels a little pressure when receiving the hits. However, he tells his opponent that he is far too confident. But he thinks that because of that place, the power of his long-range attack has been greatly weakened, and he needs to find another way. He multiplies himself to gain a slight advantage, but the Horned Man only thinks that he will have a little difficulty capturing that guy alive without the equipment. He starts creating several whirlpools, saying that it is all useless, because that entire ocean is his shield and Dongxia's attacks are too weak. But Dongxia does not back down, saying that it does not matter whether they are in the ocean or not, his punch can pierce even the sky. The two continue clashing blows, and the news helicopter sees an extremely large wave compared to the beach umbrellas in the middle of the beach, which looked like mere ants. The Horned Man tells the superhero that he is indeed very strong, but unfortunately, it is not enough to break through his defenses. Dongxia is impressed and asks how the opponent managed to come out even after that attack, because if one punch is not enough, he will throw 100. The Horned Man begins to realize that he will not last much longer, since this is becoming increasingly difficult and he needs to use the equipment soon, otherwise he may really end up losing. Their fight becomes more and more aggressive, however. The Horned Man grabs Dongxia's hand and says that this is the end of the game for him. Dongxia realizes that something is wrong because he cannot use his powers, and the Horned Man finally manages to imprison him. Meanwhile, at school, the protagonist was walking and looks at his phone, wondering why Qingmeng still has not added him as a friend, and maybe he should have let her send him her contact information so he could take the initiative. Xingxuan runs over to him and asks him to wait, thanking him for helping her during that class. The protagonist says that it was nothing because she had helped him before too. Xingzhuan, surprised and also a little confused, says that she thought he had no superpowers before, so how did he manage to do it, and asks if he could share that experience with her. Xuantian tries to explain it in a simpler way, saying that he simply woke up that way and that there is not much to share. He thinks that his master had said this matter is only between the two of them, so he cannot say much. He says goodbye, saying that there is a nearby supermarket offering big discounts on eggs, so he cannot miss that opportunity, and leaves. But Xingxuan does not easily swallow the explanation and says that, apparently, the protagonist is very suspicious because she has the feeling that he is hiding something. A short time later, she goes to the protagonist's house saying that luckily she managed to get his address, and if she can hide inside his house, she will find out what he is trying to conceal. As soon as she enters, she emphasizes that she needs to find a place to hide but she notices that everything in that room seems a little strange. She holds a bottle in her hand and questions if that was what allowed him to awaken. As soon as she uncorks it, she smells something different. Xuantian returns home and shouts to Xingjun that there was a sale at the supermarket today and he bought his favorite noodles. The protagonist asks where he is, and his master explains that he had said he needed some herbs to refine pills, so he is probably out of town. Xingxuan, who was hiding, surprises the protagonist, hugs him, calls him daddy, and says that he finally came back. Xuantian becomes confused and scared, asking her what she is doing inside his house and why she is calling him father. Sixizi finds the opened bottle and tells the protagonist that maybe she accidentally smelled the potion made by Xingjun. She continues hugging and rubbing herself against the protagonist while still calling him daddy, saying that she missed him very much. Xuantian tries to wake her up, saying that he is not her father and that she needs to pull herself together. His master explains that that potion has little effect on those who cultivate immortality, but ordinary people can get drunk for an entire day after inhaling even a little. So the only way to sober her up is to force the energy out. His master places her hand inside her belly, but as soon as she touches it, she notices something strange and emphasizes that this little girl has a spiritual root in her body, a fire spiritual root that has an affinity with spiritual energy. The protagonist becomes happy, asking if that means she was also born with the gift of cultivating immortality. His master says that is exactly right and thinks that although she is not as qualified as the protagonist, she is not bad either. Shixizi asks the protagonist to wake her up with spiritual energy. That way, she will also be able to see if the protagonist has improved in controlling spiritual energy. Xuantian says that it is all right and touches her belly, applying spiritual energy. This causes her to throw up the potion she had smelled earlier. His master emphasizes that she observed that little girl for a long time, and that she seems like a very good girl. When she wakes up, the protagonist needs to tell her about his cultivation of immortality, and if she decides to accompany him to practice, that process will also help the protagonist a lot. A short time later, she had woken up, and he explained the whole story to her. Xingxuan becomes happy and excited, saying that it is incredible that something exists beyond superpowers. She holds his hand, saying that she would also like to learn because she is tired of depending on her father's powers. Shixizi says that if she has agreed, then the protagonist needs to take the first step. She uses her energy inside the protagonist's body, saying that the girl still cannot see her soul, so she needs to use his body. As soon as she takes control of Xuantian, she asks Xingxuan not to move. He touches her lips and she's a little surprised, asking what he's going to do. He kisses her on the forehead and she quickly begins to be taken to another dimension, questioning what that is, because she feels something emerging inside her own body. As soon as she opens her eyes, she sees Sixizi and says that she is very beautiful, asking if she is the protagonist's master. Xuantian says yes, and says that apparently now she can also see her. His master says that it really worked, but Jingxuan, still lost, asks what it was that she just saw. His master explains that she illuminated her spiritual consciousness with the protagonist's spiritual energy and that her spiritual root was activated. Jingxuan hugs her new master, thanking her and asking if she can now also use magic. Sizizi asks her to be a little patient and take that Flying Star Sword manual to study for a while. Xingxuan thanks her deeply for everything happening there. The protagonist says that it is already getting very late and asks her to stay for dinner, because he will cook, and she agrees. Sometime later, Yunshu had also arrived and met her brother's new friend. Xingxuan tastes a little and is impressed, saying that he is a great cook, and starts eating a lot. Yunshu even gets a little worried, asking her to slow down a bit. Xingxuan explains that it has been quite a while since she had dinner with so many people, so her appetite increased a lot. Xuantian asks her if her parents do not have dinner with her. She becomes a little sad and explains that they are very busy with work, so they do not have time for her. When she is at home, she's accompanied by a robot nanny. The protagonist is surprised and says that must be pretty bad. He thinks that since she is the daughter of heroes, she would have a happy and wonderful life, but apparently he was a little wrong. Yunshu says that Xingxuan can feel free to come there whenever she wants, because she will always be welcome. Xingxuan becomes happy and says that she will take advantage of that opportunity because she has a lot of advice to ask the protagonist for. After dinner the next day, they were watching breaking news saying that this could be the greatest crisis in the history of the Hero Association. Recently, the association sent several S-rank heroes to annihilate the King of the Deep Sea, but no one returned, including Dongxia, who ranks third among the S-rank heroes. The protagonist asks if that is not her father, asking if he is okay. Xingxuan does not know what to answer because her mother had not told her what had happened to her father. She decides to act calmly, telling the protagonist that it is better for them to leave that to the Hero Association because they will take care of everything and do not need to worry. She turns off the television and the two return to cultivating, but his master notices that she is a little absent-minded and tells her not to get distracted. Xingxuan tells her master that she learned to sense spiritual energy yesterday and learned many small spells. At this pace, how long will it take for her to reach the Qi training stage? She asks if she cannot take a pill like the one the protagonist took before, but Sixiji says that she cannot think about taking shortcuts. The pill the protagonist took to enter the Qi training stage had side effects. Although he is in the Qi training stage, his spiritual energy has been depleted twice as much as the average person's. Xuantian gets a little angry, saying that he did not know anything about that and asks why she did not tell him about it before. His master emphasizes that there is no reason to worry. As long as he practices carefully, the side effect will naturally disappear once he reaches the foundation stage. Xingjun returns with a big smile. His master asks if he managed to find all the herbs he needed. He says that this is the last medicinal herb, Jade Ganoderma. It is used to enhance the capacity for storing spiritual energy and will soon be refined. He asks who that little girl in the room is. Sixizi explains that she is her new disciple and that he arrived at just the right time. She asks what kind of magical weapons he has and tells him to bring some immediately so that her new disciple can defend herself. But he thinks about what his master just said, because all his magical weapons are meant for collecting medicinal materials and should not be given to anyone else. Zixiji scolds him, saying that he cannot hide them from her, and tells him to hurry up and take them out immediately. He hands over an invisibility jade which can be used to become invisible. All the user needs to do is add a bit of spiritual energy. This item is very useful if the person needs to get out of an emergency situation. Xing Xuan becomes happy and thanks him for the gift, thinking that now she can become invisible, and that means she can use this magical weapon to save her father. While she was in the middle of the street, she receives a call from her mother, who was furious, asking where she was because the butler had said that she had not returned yet. But Xingxuan argues with her mother, saying that this has absolutely nothing to do with her, and asks why she was hiding information about her father. The president becomes a little upset, saying that telling her daughter would not solve the problem and that all she needs to do is go to school and behave properly because she will take care of everything. Xingxuan asks what her mother meant by telling her would not solve the problem. She reminds her mother that she is the daughter of heroes and that if something happened to her dad, she does not know what she would do. She hangs up, telling her mother to forget all of this, since it is a waste of time. The president keeps trying to talk to her daughter, but she no longer answers. Xingxuan looks at a panel with her father's photo saying, "Mighty King." She thinks that other people may look down on her, but now even her own mother is looking down on her. She thinks that this time, she needs to rely on her own strength and prove to everyone that she is capable. She has always been labeled as the daughter of heroes since she was a child and has held herself to high standards. In their eyes, she was supposed to be superior to ordinary people in every aspect. Despite her great efforts to prove herself, she always tried to live up to everyone's expectations. Her powers also mysteriously disappeared, and every day she can only depend on her father's superpower to try to do anything. But now she no longer wants to live in her parents' shadows. Even if it means using the immortal art she just learned, she will do everything to save her father by herself, because her month of vehicle driving training was not in vain. Meanwhile, at the base, Xingjun was sleeping like a baby. She manages to find the base and becomes happy, saying that her father must be inside, but she still needs to break down that barrier. She launches 2 attacks, causing huge explosions. Inside, several guards notice the attack and shout that they are under attack and need to prepare for combat, because the attack has just made the energy system and the enchantment device unstable, so they need to send someone outside. The soldiers quickly go out, but because of her invisibility, she manages to pass by them calmly. As soon as she approaches the barrier, she thinks that the enchantment seems to be weakened and did not stop the ship's attack. She manages to pass through and attacks 2 guards at the same time. However, she still does not know where her father is being held, since that place is bigger than she expected. But she manages to take an item from the guards, and her father must be imprisoned somewhere on that floor. After searching for a while, she finally manages to find her father. She creates several swords and starts attacking, saying that she will save her father no matter what. Suddenly, the horned man appears, saying that apparently the person who interrupted his beautiful dreams was her. The next day, the protagonist was at school, but he was wondering why Xingxuan still had not arrived and whether maybe she was sick. Jiki sees the protagonist and says that she will not show up today and that since she did not come, she decided to ask. The protagonist becomes worried and asks what she is talking about. Jiki approaches, saying that she is sure Xingxuan does not want to go to school after her father was captured and that apparently now the protagonist is hers alone. But Xuantian pushes her away and asks when he became someone's property, then leaves the school. Talking to his master, he emphasizes that Xingxuan worked very hard and never missed school, so something must have happened. His master explains that she was distracted during training yesterday. The protagonist realizes that maybe she went to try to save her father, but she no longer even has powers, so she could not be stupid enough to do that. His master says that she has a feeling that the magical weapon given to her last night is very far away from there, and she really knows how to make people nervous. The protagonist becomes worried and runs out, asking what she could possibly do with so few techniques, so she needs to be saved. Zixizi tries to intervene, asking him to wait a moment, explaining that the protagonist needs to go back home and take the robe that was given to him. Besides, he needs to borrow Xingjun's hunter bell and Hunyuan bracelet, because if he goes to fight with nothing, it will be a dead end. While the two were flying over the sea, the protagonist asks his master if she can really know the exact location. His master says yes and emphasizes that they are already getting close. However, he needs to be careful in battle and must not die no matter what. Xuantian asks his master not to worry and to leave everything to him. He dives into the water and thinks that these things related to immortals are truly incredible, because by using that robe, he can breathe normally underwater and his movements are not restricted. However, he would like to test something first. He waves something that looks like a handkerchief and creates a huge whirlpool attacking the base. The guards become worried, questioning what is happening outside and whether it could be the heroes. Another guard looks at the cameras and says that there is indeed someone there, but the protagonist was simply tired of using those things. The system was unable to detect the target because the individual is not registered. The guards are surprised, saying that boy is not even registered by the Hero Association, so how can he have such incredible power? However, since he is a nobody, they can deal with that boy with a single shot from the water dragon cannon. The horned man enters the command room and asks his subordinates to wait, saying that he will deal with that boy himself. He thinks that this is the first time he has met someone with so much power over the ocean, so he is curious to see who will be crowned the king of the seas. Outside, the protagonist was still attacking, saying that he has already caused a huge mess, so why has no one come out yet? Suddenly, he realizes that an enormous volume of water is coming toward him and manages to defend himself. The horned man appears, saying that the protagonist was turning the ocean upside down with only a piece of cloth, and that is impressive. He creates several water sharks and orders them to attack the protagonist. Xuantian thinks that if he wants to take control, he will need to consume much more spiritual energy. However, if he strikes 2 more times, he will be exhausted. Even so, he creates a shield around himself, and all the sharks made of water turn back to attack their creator. The horned man is impressed, asking how that is possible and what kind of superpower that is, because he can even surpass his moves. Because of that, the horned man thinks that his opponent's power must not be psychokinesis and is probably an area of the special system. He activates Dragon Claw Wave to counterattack, but the protagonist manages to advance, telling him to immediately release Xingxuan and all the heroes he imprisoned inside. The horned man grabs the piece of cloth, thinking that the protagonist must use that thing to control the waves. With a smile on his face, he tells the protagonist that he has to admit it is very brave of him to come there alone. He grips the cloth tightly and creates serpents to attack, emphasizing that the protagonist had better give up on those heroic dreams he is having. Xuantian becomes scared, seeing that his opponent's strength really is very great. However, since he wants that thing so badly, now he will receive it. The horned man manages to grab the cloth and thinks that as long as he destroys it, the protagonist will be unable to use his specialized power to control the waves. But when he tries to tear that piece of cloth apart, he becomes confused, since he cannot rip that old rag. The protagonist uses his powers, saying that now he will solve the problem and wraps his opponent in the cloth. But the horned man manages to break free, asking if the protagonist thinks that old piece of cloth will contain him. He attacks the protagonist with everything he has, but his attack has no effect, and he is shocked. He keeps attacking with everything he has, but it is useless. Xuantian starts mocking the situation and asks if that is really how S-rank villains attack, because it is nothing but a joke, since all of them are very weak. He emphasizes that now it is his turn to attack. The horned man starts feeling pressured and thinks that the protagonist's weapons are very powerful, and he needs to force him into the barrier and then capture him, because he will not be able to defeat him while he has those weapons. Zixizi appears, telling the protagonist that he must not enter the barrier, because there is something inside restricting the flow of spiritual energy. He realizes that he was already very close to the barrier, and his master emphasizes that once he crosses that barrier, he will no longer be able to use immortal methods. His weapons are the only things he can rely on. The horned man takes advantage of this opening and advances, saying that now he will not be able to escape. Xuantian interrupts his attack with his piece of cloth and thinks that it is no wonder the heroes were captured. However, he will not die there and can escape at any moment using another weapon. And if that is the case, he will beat his opponent at his own game. He decides to enter the barrier on his own. The horned man creates a water dragon, saying that now that poor boy is trapped. But Schwantian already had a plan in mind. He needs to trick his opponent by pretending that the weapon is broken. He receives the attack, asking why his weapon is not working. But even after receiving the attack, he remains without a single scratch and starts laughing, telling his opponent that although his weapon is broken, he is still unable to defeat him. The horned man traps him inside a water bubble, saying that this does not matter because he cannot escape without his superpowers. Humans are the same as fish. He thinks that he needs to take that boy inside the bubble and then study his defensive weapons one by one. Schwantian keeps pretending to be scared and asks what that guy is doing, but all of this was going according to his plan. The horned man takes him inside, saying that since he wants to save those heroes so badly, then he will allow the protagonist to see with his own eyes their pathetic faces after losing their superpowers. He throws the protagonist into the room, telling him to behave, and emphasizes that tomorrow he will tell him how those heroes lost their powers. 5 minutes later, Schwantian goes to the door and realizes that apparently there is no one on the other side. Now he can turn that base into complete chaos, and it is time to use that bracelet. He calls upon Chaos to free the doors for the Mighty Supreme and generate yin and yang, and he orders his item to open it immediately. He easily manages to create a hole in the wall and looks around, saying that this bracelet is quite powerful, and he is sure Xingjun used to use it to do bad things. He keeps following the corridor, creating holes in every wall, but he cannot find anyone inside the rooms and wonders where they imprisoned Xingxuan. Meanwhile, in the level 1 room of the base, a girl was asking a young man if he had recovered his powers. Tick, the 11th S-rank superhero, says not yet, because he believes someone there has deactivated their superpowers. The 12th S-rank superheroine, named Siren, asks if it is possible that the enemy is a user of a special system. That is very troublesome. If they do not know how he activates his power, it will be difficult to escape. She becomes sad, saying that she has not done live streams for days, and if her fans find out the state she is in now, they will certainly abandon her. The protagonist manages to find the two of them, but thinks that the King of the Deep Sea even captured ordinary people, so he will come back there, later to rescue the mother and the son. A short time later, he reaches the last room and finally manages to find Dongxia. He enters the room, happy, because he finally managed to find one of the people he was looking for. Dongxia looks at the protagonist and asks who he is and whether he was sent by the Hero Association to save him. The protagonist explains that he is Xingxuan's classmate and is there to rescue the two of them. Dongxia is surprised and asks if he really is a student, questioning if that was the superpower he used just now. The protagonist says that it is more or less like that and asks if he knows where they imprisoned his daughter. But Dongxia becomes possessed by rage and asks if the protagonist is really saying that they also captured Xingxuan, and that when he gets out of there, he will make all of them pay one by one. Schwantian asks him to wait a moment because he will free him now, but Dongxia asks the protagonist to wait because that cage is specially reinforced so he cannot open it. As soon as he gets out, an alarm will be triggered and he cannot use his powers right now. Because of that, he has a very important task for the protagonist to carry out. Since he managed to get in there alone, it means he is capable of taking on that task. Schwantian asks him to say what needs to be done and he will do it. Dongxia explains that somewhere inside that base there is a machine hidden that can nullify powers, and when he destroys it, Dongxia will be able to break free on his own. The protagonist says that when he found that base, he also discovered that there is some kind of enchantment outside it and asks where he can find it. Dongxia says that he read about it in an underground laboratory he had destroyed. This machine needs to be connected to electricity, and there must be a heavy army protecting it. It is difficult to fight them directly, so he suggests destroying the energy system. Schwantian says that he understands and that he will carry out the mission immediately. Meanwhile, the guards were drinking, telling everyone to relax, because the head captain is protecting her. Besides, the boss is in his own room, so they can have their own fun and no one will find out. They open the door saying that she is one of the top celebrity streamers, much better than the girl the boss captured yesterday. They ask Siren to play with them right now, but she gets irritated, asking how they dare do that. One of the guards keeps laughing, saying that now that they have lost their superpowers, she is just a weak woman, and the other one is an ordinary child, so there is nothing they can do. All she needs to do is obey the orders they are giving. Tick steps in front, saying that he will not allow it, but one of the guards kicks him, sending him flying away, telling him to get out of the way immediately. He gets ready and tells his colleagues that they can enjoy themselves as much as they want that night because they will have a beautiful S-rank superheroine. She tries to attack, saying that they are nothing but a bunch of disgusting men, but the guards grab her foot and say that she can keep trying because the more she struggles, the more exciting things become. Suddenly, the protagonist opens the portal and punches the soldier in the face, knocking out one of his teeth, telling them to take their filthy hands off that boy's mother immediately. But Siren gets angry and shouts at the protagonist, asking who he is calling a mother and questioning whether she looks that old. Tick asks her to calm down because that boy just saved the two of them. The protagonist says that they cannot waste time, so he needs to quickly finish off those three idiots. With one attack, he manages to defeat all three at the same time. Siren is impressed, asking if that is the boy's superpower. However, he should not be able to use his power inside that place, so who is he really? He goes over to one of the guards and takes one of their communicators, saying that now no one will disturb them for a while. Besides, they can also take that communicator and create a communication channel. If anything happens, they just need to call him immediately. Siren thanks him and asks if he was sent by the Hero Association. But the protagonist says that he is just a passing student. However, he has other things to do now and will come back to save them later. He opens the gate again and passes through the wall, leaving her surprised, because he managed to leave that place extremely easily. Meanwhile, in the security room, the guard was sleeping while the protagonist was doing all of that. Another guard enters and punches his companion in the head, calling him an idiot and asking who let him sleep there, because they need to send those heroes to Cthulhu and none of them can be missing. But as soon as he looks at one of the panels, he gets scared and asks how that boy managed to escape. The guard runs out saying that he is going there now and that his companion needs to sound the alarm and warn the boss. The two guards standing in the corridor say that it is very boring to stay there, so they need to go out and have some fun. The protagonist thinks that after a long time, he has finally arrived, but suddenly the alarm begins to sound and the two guards run toward him. He thinks that he does not have much time to waste and needs to race against time, defeats the two of them easily, and advances to the energy equipment room. As soon as he enters, he realizes that this seems to be the right place, and now all he needs to do is destroy it. But one of the guards tries to attack him from inside. However, his robe protects him from any attack. Meanwhile, inside the study room, the horned man was holding the protagonist's handkerchief, saying that it is very strange because the texture of the cloth is normal and it is also not a product made from superpowers, so why is it so resistant? However, he decides to leave that aside since the people from Cthulhu will go there to check and they will conduct a lot of research in that field, so he believes he should be able to get some answer. He starts dancing, saying that it is impossible to control the ocean with only a piece of cloth. Suddenly, the alarm starts ringing for him too. He asks what is happening and one of the guards bursts through the door shouting for the boss but becomes a little surprised when he sees what he was doing. The horned man composes himself and asks what the problem is. The guard shouts in fear, saying that the guy they captured earlier escaped. The deputy chief is impressed, asking how he managed to do that since he cannot use his superpowers inside that place. He orders all the soldiers to stay exactly where they are because he will deal with this problem personally. The deputy chief runs out thinking that the protagonist was heading to the energy equipment room, so maybe he knows the secret. And if he lets all the heroes escape, those people from Cthulhu will tear him apart, so he needs to stop him immediately. Meanwhile, the guard who is trying to attack the protagonist questions how he can use his superpowers, because they have tested that machine so many times that it is impossible for there to be a bug. Schwantian laughs and attacks the soldier, saying that it is because he is the bug himself. He begins destroying all the energy equipment and laughs, saying that the task is complete. The girl from before, outside, was approaching, saying that something strange was happening because the machine's barrier disappeared and something is wrong. Chelsea, a member of Cthulhu, asks Monet if the heroes the boss asked them to collect did not escape. McCarter, another member of Cthulhu, says that this will actually be a little fun, since she loves this game of cat and mouse. Monet becomes worried, saying that something happened, and asks Chelsea to go with her so they can check the machine. Meanwhile, McCarter needs to go check on the heroes. They reach level 3 of the base, and Chelsea realizes that the energy system is broken. Monet asks him to recharge the device immediately because she hopes those heroes have not realized that they recovered their powers. Chelsea starts laughing and uses his electricity power, saying that his turn has finally come. However, a huge explosion happens, throwing the two of them back. Dongxia appears, saying that this was already expected, and apparently the two of them are guilty. Monet asks Chelsea to leave that to her, and he needs to hurry and go get the other heroes. Meanwhile, on level 2 of the base, the protagonist was entering and sees McCarter attacking Siren and Tick. He cannot believe the two of them were being attacked again and asks who they are fighting now. Siren keeps attacking, saying that if she remembers correctly, that is the S-rank wanted criminal named McCarter, who was rescued by Cthulhu from Monty Island prison. She blocks the attacks and emphasizes that she did not expect anyone to recognize her. The protagonist starts moving inside the room, saying that the king of the deep sea is still around there, and now another problem like this has appeared. McCarter says that there is a rat sneaking around and tries to attack the protagonist, but Tick shouts for him to be careful and creates an ice barrier to protect him, asking if he is okay. The protagonist says yes and thanks him. McCarter gets even angrier, saying that this obstacle is very annoying. The protagonist steps in front of the two of them and Siren asks him to be careful because that woman is very fast. Schwantian thinks that they need to find a way to restrict that woman's movements. He notices an opportunity and attacks by sending the ring toward her. However, she defends herself, saying that this kind of attack will hardly hit. But the ring swerves, grows larger, and starts chasing her. The ring's speed is extremely greater than hers, and it manages to place itself around her body, imprisoning her. He tells the others to attack now. Tick uses Ice Pillar, and Siren attacks with Obliteration Arrow. The two attacks come at her with full force, and she cannot move. Outside, Chelsea realizes that the sound of the fight was coming from behind that wall. But suddenly, his companion is thrown hard into him, and the protagonist celebrates, saying that they managed to hit both of them with only one attack. He takes his ring back. Siren and Tick look at each other, wondering what kind of superpower the protagonist has, because they cannot feel any superpower coming from him, but he has a surprisingly impressive style. Suddenly, another huge explosion happens, drawing the attention of the three of them. The horned man appears, saying that he has finally found where that rat was hiding. Schwantian says that guy probably heard the noise from the fight and came to them. Siren and Tick step forward, and she says that guy is very strong and the protagonist has no superpowers and is not a member of the association, so he only needs to stay behind them and away from the battle. But Schwantian thanks her for the consideration, however. On a real battlefield, the opponent will not let anyone leave just because they do not have superpowers. Besides, that man is focused on him, so that fight is his. The two are impressed again, seeing that the protagonist is not only very strong, but also very confident. Tick says that he would at least like to help in that fight, but the deputy chief simply throws him away, telling him to get out of the way already. The protagonist takes advantage of that distraction and says that now it is his moment to attack, using the cloud-piercing finger. The attack was so powerful that it caused a huge explosion. He returns asking if he really managed to win the fight already. But the horned man shouts, saying that he was able to make him reveal his true form, which means he underestimated the protagonist. The three are impressed, saying that there is no way that guy managed to withstand that attack, but the truth is that he had transformed into a huge dragon. Siren says that they must keep attacking non-stop. However, the attacks were not working. Siren realizes that his dragon scales are very thick and that there is absolutely no way to pierce them. The dragon aims at the protagonist, saying that now he is going to hell, but Siren steps in front of the attack to save him. She falls unconscious to the ground. The protagonist tries to talk to her, but there is no response. He looks to the side and sees that Tick had also already been defeated. He questions what he should do now that both of his companions have been defeated. The horned man says that the protagonist only has two options. The first is to hand over the weapon in his hands and reveal its secrets. That way, he promises to let him leave without pain. The second option is to be cut apart limb by limb, and he will make sure he can never use those things again. The protagonist asks his master if there is another way to use that bracelet. She explains that the bracelet also has other effects, but with his current cultivation level, if he forces its use, he will be severely exhausted. Schwantian starts releasing more power, saying that there is no way to know the consequences if he does not try, not to mention that he does not want to be defeated by that kind of useless person. The protagonist advances, saying that the price for his weapons will have to be paid with his opponent's own life. However, the dragon says that those things will have no effect on him and receives the attacks. He starts duplicating, creating several other rings. The dragon keeps laughing, asking if the protagonist is doing some kind of magic trick for him because he does not know what use that has on his body. Schwantian asks if that is really true and asks what the dragon will do with 10 of those rings. The rings begin trapping the dragon, and Schwantian orders them to start closing in, crushing him. His master looks at the protagonist and thinks that he really is very smart because he had the idea of using his duplication power and, at the same time, provoked the king of the deep sea and distracted him so that he could trap him with a single move. Besides, she realizes that the protagonist has already completely exhausted his spiritual energy because his legs are starting to tremble, but even so, he refuses to give up. This makes her even more enchanted by that boy's strength. The dragon, still being crushed by the rings, shouts that he will manage to break free and eliminate the protagonist. Schwantian, trembling and almost out of energy, says that he would like to see who manages to kill the other first. But Sixizi asks him to wait a moment and explains that that beast from the bottom of the sea possesses abundant spiritual energy, and if he can sign a master-servant spiritual contract with him, it will be of great benefit to the protagonist's cultivation in the future. Xuantian tells the king of the deep sea that he has two options. He can become his spiritual pet and follow his orders, or he can choose to be crushed and turned into nothing but meat paste. But the dragon tells the protagonist to shut up, saying that he is worthy of being the king of the deep sea, so how could he become someone's pet? But Xuantian only starts squeezing harder, and the horned man realizes that he has no other way out. He will be crushed to death and shouts that he accepts and will sign the contract. He thinks that a wise man knows when to retreat, so he needs to pretend to obey and then find a chance to defeat that boy. The protagonist forces the contract and the dragon accepts, saying that everything is done. Dongxia breaks through the wall carrying Monet and says that apparently the protagonist does not need help. Xuantian is happy to see him. Dongxia explains that he left everyone else in a safe place and thanks the protagonist for his hard work. Now he will take those people there to headquarters because he assumes they may be able to obtain more information. Xuantian says that is great and thinks that this guy really is his idol. However, suddenly, something passes by Dongxia extremely fast, ripping off one of his arms. A woman apologizes, saying that she did not mean to rip it off, but asks if this is what S-rank heroes are because they are very weak. Dongxia tries to heal himself to contain the wound, and the protagonist tries to go over to him to see if he's all right. But Dongxia asks him not to come any closer, because that woman is very dangerous. He thinks that for her to have managed to appear silently behind him, her level must be far above that other woman dressed in black. Besides, Siren and Tick are injured. The longer they stand still, the worse it will get, so he must end that fight as quickly as possible. He tries to attack, but she manages to subdue him quickly. He is surprised, asking if that woman's power is magma. She laughs, saying that the first hero has already been collected. She places Monet on the ground and goes over to Tick, saying that now it is time to take the others. But the protagonist throws his ring at her and interrupts her. In a terrifying voice, he tells her not to dare because if she takes one more step, then she will die. The woman keeps mocking him and asks why there is an incompetent rat trapped in there. The protagonist starts moving, telling Xiaohai to protect the two of them, because he will try to save Dongxia. The dragon follows his master's orders, picks up the other two superheroes to protect them, and tries to attack that woman. But she counterattacks and emphasizes that Xiaohai is nothing but a useless pawn. The dragon shouts that he is being burned. Xuantian brings him back to save his dragon. The woman moves quickly toward the protagonist and asks what his name is. Xuantian is impressed by her speed. She starts smiling, saying that looking into the protagonist's eyes reminds her of a couple whose surname was Zhou, whom she killed 10 years ago. She emphasizes that the man looked a lot like the protagonist, and he did not want to hand over what she wanted, even when she was about to end his life. Because of that, she had to eliminate all of them, as if they were nothing but trash being thrown away. Hearing this, the protagonist is shocked, because 10 years ago means that his parents did not die because of a car accident, but because of the people from Cthulhu. He gets furious and says that she had better start talking, otherwise, but the woman moves quickly behind him and asks what will happen if she says nothing. She notices an attack coming toward her and manages to dodge, moving away from the protagonist. Dongxia managed to break through the magma cage. He asks Tick and Xuantian to run away with Siren and leave the rest to him. The protagonist refuses, but Tick ties him up and says that it is all right, asking his chief to be careful and return safely. The protagonist, still unable to accept that situation, orders him to untie him and asks if Tick has forgotten that they are from the same association. So how can they leave a member alone and run away from a fight? Tick, with tears in his eyes, shouts that he has not forgotten, but he also knows very well what a hero's responsibility should be. They are all running out of energy and staying there will only get in his way. They need to run, otherwise everyone will be killed because they are too weak at the moment. Xuantian still cannot accept all of this. The woman uses her magma ability, saying that no one will escape. But Dongxia steps forward and creates clones, telling all of them to leave immediately because a true hero will not be defeated by just that. He uses his ability to contain the advance of the magma and looks at the protagonist, telling him to tell his daughter to remember to eat on time and not get discouraged if she cannot use her abilities in the future because as long as she has a brave heart, she can still be a heroine. Xuantian, furious, shouts that he will definitely tell her all of that and take care of her. A short time later, Dongxia had been captured and the woman was lamenting, saying that she let a few rats escape and that the boss would bother her again. Sometime later, inside his apartment on television, the news was reporting follow-up coverage on the hero kidnapping incident, which had lasted many days. The Hero Association dispatched a large number of heroes and destroyed the base in the deep sea. Except for Dongxia, all the others were successfully rescued. Yunshu was on the bed with her brother, peeling an apple. She places it beside him, telling him to remember to eat it later. She leaves the room a little upset because her brother has not said anything since he came back and continues in that state, but she has no idea what he is thinking. Xuantian was blaming himself for everything that happened because he is too weak, and if he had been even a little stronger, he could have prevented all of that from happening. His master appears, asking if he is going to stay discouraged like that forever. The protagonist hits the bed angrily, saying that ever since he began learning to become an immortal, he discovered that it was something more powerful than having superpowers. So he thought there was nothing in the world he could not achieve and never thought about his own limitations. If he keeps being reckless like before, he will not be able to protect anyone, just like what happened now. In a confident tone, he begs his master to teach him how to become even stronger as quickly as possible. He goes to Xingxuan's room and tells her everything her father had said. She asks if her father really told him to say all those words because he really is an adorable idiot. The protagonist asks her not to worry because there are many great heroes in the association, and they will definitely find a way to rescue her father. With a smile on her face, Xingxuan says that it is all right, that the protagonist does not need to stay there to comfort her, and asks him to leave because she is going to rest. But as soon as he leaves, the smile on her face falls into complete despair. She remembers when she was just a small child and her father would come through the door apologizing because he had come back late again. A dozen children had been trapped in a fire, and his duty was to save them. However, he promised that the following year he would definitely be there blowing out the candles with her. However, with tears in her eyes, she slapped her father's hand, saying that he kept saying the same thing every year. She begins questioning what it means to be an S-rank hero and what that duty he always talks about is, because he is only hurting himself every day. Dongxia always kept a smile on his face, as if he were proud of everything he did. He explains to his daughter that his duty is to protect everyone. Only when they face danger head-on does he feel how precious life is. Because of that, he believes that one day she will be able to understand what he is saying, because taking on such a duty is the glory of a true hero. Tears begin to fall and she shouts, saying that her father is a true idiot for putting himself in danger to save others. Outside, Xuantian heard all her despair and felt the weight of being weak fall onto his shoulders. He calls his master, saying that it is time to become stronger. Sixiji says that from that point on, she will be stricter with the protagonist, and he does not even need to try saying that he is too tired or that he cannot take it. However, he answers without hesitation that there is no problem, because there is only one thing going through his head. He promises himself, his parents, and everyone who suffered that he will crush every member, every base, and every last trace of Cthulhu's existence. Inside his house, his master was asking why the protagonist was slowing down and tells him not to stop. Xuantian, with his arms trembling, tells his master that she is very heavy. Sixizi says that this is complete nonsense, because she is not that heavy. Besides, she's only in a spiritual state and has not added any pressure. She remembers all of the protagonist's training and thinks that in these past few days, that boy started training under extremely high pressure. He truly has perseverance, something many people cannot maintain. She snaps her fingers, asking him to stand up, because she will teach him something new. She emphasizes that she is a teacher, so she will teach a unique secret method called the Taoti Immortal Technique. He asks what kind of technique that is. His master begins explaining that this is a technique far beyond his current domain. However, since he absorbed the Forest King's power, he is ready to extract and refine the spiritual energy around him. And this is the best moment for him to practice this new method. There are two uses for that method. One of them is relying on the master-servant spiritual contract. The power of the contracted beast will be transformed into spiritual energy and transferred into the master's body so he can use it. However, there is a limit to making master-servant contracts. Based on his current cultivation, his limit is only one, and if he signs another contract, he may explode and end up dying. The protagonist is impressed to discover that such side effects exist. His master continues explaining that the other way is direct absorption. The stronger the target whose power he absorbs, the more spiritual energy he gains, which means he faces a greater risk. In the worst-case scenario, he will be devoured by the spiritual energy and lose consciousness. To solve this problem, they need to practice. She plays several psychic balls in that space, and he only needs to stand still and try to use his inner spiritual energy to attract them as if he were a magnet. If he manages to absorb the 100 spiritual energy balls, he will obtain the essence of the Taoti Immortal Technique. Excited by the situation, he shouts that there is no problem and begins absorbing them. A few days later, on the school battlefield, Zirui was still acting arrogant, calling the protagonist a bastard and saying that he had not seen him for days, so he thought he was too scared and had run away. Xuantian apologizes, however. He explains that it is very easy to forget to take out the trash. However, he does not have time to waste on nonsense and asks to start already. Zirui says that it is fine and asks the protagonist not to cry afterward. He thinks that to defeat him, he spent days dedicating himself and researching, making the most of his power. His superpower is to use money as the price to equally summon a powerful ghost giant. He managed to summon that monster using 100 million, and that is more than enough to defeat that piece of trash. His subordinates are impressed, saying that this is the first time they have seen the boss summon that thing, and they wonder how much it cost. The other one says that beast is immune to physical attacks and should have the strength of an A-rank monster. The monster tries to attack the protagonist, but he dodges and blocks the other attack. Zirui keeps provoking him, telling the protagonist not to just keep dodging, and asks where all that arrogance from before went. The protagonist keeps dodging and thinks that the monster is too large, so he cannot absorb it directly with the immortal method. In that case, he needs to counterattack first. The protagonist easily manages to cut that monster into pieces, leaving Zirui shocked by what he is seeing. His master is happy because her disciple quickly managed to discover the enemy's weakness, seeing that it is in the joints. That is not bad at all. After finishing chopping up his dinner, he devours everything, and Zirui cannot understand what is happening. The protagonist smiles and thanks him for the hospitality. The other students start saying that the protagonist is the transfer student who got an S-rank score on the freshman test, and that was impressive, because he won easily, which shows that his superpower is very strong. A short time earlier, while he was practicing, Schwantian refused to give up no matter what, saying that no matter the cost, he would manage to absorb all those balls. As soon as he pulled in the last one, he shouted to his master, saying that he had finally done it. She says that he did a good job and that now he can rest. But Schwantian refuses and asks her to add another 100 psychic balls because he will double his training. This leaves her surprised. Back in the present, she thinks that he not only learned the Taodi immortal technique in a short time, but also precisely strengthened the power flowing from his Dante into his limbs. Its effects are also much more stable than when he cultivated for the first time. This means that the boy's growth is visible even to the naked eye. Schwantian goes over to Zirui and says that apparently he has been defeated. The winner has already been decided. His opponent can forget their previous promise because he does not want such an incompetent son. The previous bet was that if the protagonist lost, he would have to leave that school immediately. On the other hand, if he won, Zirui would have to kneel before everyone and call the protagonist father. Zirui was extremely irritated by that, but he notices that some people behind him were saying that apparently he is screwed, and now he will no longer have the courage to show off at school again, because the son of the richest man has now become poor, and not even his father will acknowledge such shame. Zirui is completely humiliated on the ground. Meanwhile, at Cthulhu's space base in the North Sea, a monster arrives and goes to meet Cthulhu's main boss named Isogda. He tells his subordinate that he is 2 minutes late. That is the Gravity King, an S-rank monster. The Gravity King emphasizes that he is very busy and that if it were not for Miss Monet, he would not even have gone there. Isogda tells the Gravity King that he should know that he never waits for anyone. But the Gravity King simply ignores all of that. Monet goes over to the Gravity King and asks him to look at the plan first because she is sure he will be interested. As soon as he starts looking at the plan, he realizes that he needs to create chaos and make Summer Island disappear. And that is very interesting. That mission is dangerous, so the price will be 3 times the current payment. He thinks that if such a thing happens, it will be a great event that shakes the world, so the eyes of the whole world will be on him. That way, he will earn the title of the most evil villain in history, the Gravity King. He emphasizes that if the plan goes well, he hopes Miss Monet can have a drink with him later. She says that if everything goes well, she can consider doing that. He gets excited, saying that he will prepare, and they only need to wait for the good news. Monet asks her boss if, after they finish that mission, she can gouge out that guy's eyes. Isogda says she can feel free to do whatever she wants. Meanwhile, inside the laboratory, Dongxia was being used as a lab rat. A chief goes over there and asks how the experiment is going. The woman from before explains that they are trying to extract his superpowers, but he keeps resisting with psychic power. At the current speed, it will take more than a month to do it. Isogda asks her to remember that no mistakes will be allowed in the wall program. She tells the boss that she met a teenager who looked a lot like Dr. Zhou while she was capturing Dongxia, so she suspects that there may be some kind of connection between them. Isogda grabs her by the neck and she gets excited, saying that this feeling is very good. He asks if she is saying there was a leak in the operation. He shouts at her, saying that he can keep her head where it is now, but she needs to go find out exactly what happened and clean everything up. Otherwise, he will rip off what she calls a head. Meanwhile, on Summer Island, Jiki was sitting there looking at the protagonist and Xingxuan. She thinks that Xingxuan has changed a lot after recovering. She became more stable and focused, and completed the D-rank monster cleanup mission in only 2 days. Xingxuan gets up and tells Xuantian that she is going to surf for a bit. Jiki thinks that, on the other hand, the protagonist completed that same mission in only 1 day, and something must be going on between the two of them. His master appears saying that the top of that mountain is full of spiritual energy so they can train there. Cynthia asks if her sister saw that Summer Island actually has a Chinese-style pavilion right there. Sinmia asks if that is serious. She is the younger twin sister and the daughter of the world prime minister. Cynthia says that her clairvoyant eyes can see through thousands of kilometers, so they need to go. She is the older twin sister and the daughter of the world prime minister. Meanwhile, the protagonist was cultivating at the top of that mountain. He thinks that the heat dissipation effect of that robe is very bad and that it is very difficult to stay focused with so much heat, because he really wishes he had some ice cubes at that moment. Suddenly, he notices that some snowflakes have started falling. He is surprised to see that the staircase was covered in ice and that the two of them were approaching. Cynthia continues excitedly telling her sister to hurry up, because she said there is a pavilion right there. Suddenly, the ocean and the sky begin behaving strangely, and Cynthia ends up tripping and falling on top of the protagonist. He grabs a place he should not have and tries to explain himself, saying that he is very sorry because he did not do it on purpose. He asks if she is all right and why the ground is shaking, because something must be wrong. Suddenly, the entire island begins to float, and people scream that they do not know what is happening because the island seems to be flying. The Gravity King approaches, saying that the time for fun has arrived. Fiberclawed appears with a small army of monsters, saying that the storms have surrounded that place and that they need to go to the different parts of the island and eliminate all unstable elements. She is the second commander of the Gravity King. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still confused, questioning why the island was floating. Suddenly, an illusion of the Gravity King appears, greeting everyone and saying that the stage is set and that they are going to have a crazy elimination banquet. The protagonist questions why the S-rank fugitive monster, the Gravity King, is there. He rushes off quickly, saying that there are many citizens on that island and that he needs to save them all. Cynthia tells her sister that they also need to help. She thinks that normally their father would not let them face such danger, but now they finally have the opportunity to fight. Meanwhile, at Hero headquarters, Tina tells the president that the Gravity King appeared in 13 places simultaneously around the world. Most of his clones selected crowded places to cause destruction, resulting in many casualties. Currently, they cannot determine which one is his true original body. Summer Island is in a complicated situation. It is located in the sea east of the city. The Gravity King made the island float into the sky and become trapped in controlled clouds. A large number of tourists were trapped on the island, as well as the other students from the Hero School. Initially, it is estimated that the number of people involved reaches tens of thousands. The president asked them to send all S-rank heroes, because the safety of the citizens is the priority. Besides, those clones are quite powerful, so they need to be careful. And the mission to save the island is entrusted to Shining because she needs to leave now. Shining is informed that he has just received the coordinates of Summer Island because it is being hijacked by the Gravity King and is currently floating in the sky. Because of that, he is being assigned to handle it due to his ability to fly. And if he happens to find the real Gravity King, he needs to report it immediately. Meanwhile, in the middle of the island, the other monsters were causing true chaos, making the humans beg not to be eliminated. One of the monsters holds a human, saying that the only thing he wants is to eliminate everyone. But suddenly, he is attacked by the protagonist, who goes over to the humans and asks if they're all right. He defeats all the monsters in front of him, saying that people with superpowers need to gather and help ordinary people first. Men need to protect women and children at all costs. They can leave through the right side and try not to be alone. He thinks that the teachers and students from the Hero School are there, so he believes they should be able to protect those who are temporarily helpless. The people with superpowers try to control the crowd, asking them not to panic and to stay calm. The twins also approach, defeating one of the monsters, asking them to stop bullying the weak. They continue attacking, causing a huge mess among some monsters, but they end up getting distracted and are caught off guard by another monster who knocks them to the ground. The monster starts laughing, saying that he found a pair of beautiful sisters and that tonight will be like paradise. But the protagonist appears behind him, asking what paradise he is talking about, because the only place he is going is straight to hell. He uses the immortal technique to absorb that demon immediately. As the monster is absorbed, Xuantian rushes over to one of the twins and, after confirming that she has only lost consciousness, finally lets out a sigh of relief. But suddenly, the Gravity King descends in front of him, completely enraged after realizing that one of his subordinates has been eliminated. The monster glares at Xuantian and asks if that brat was the one who killed his man. At the same time, outside the barrier, the world government forces continue trying to break through the blockade surrounding Summer Island. Several warships open fire on the thunderclouds, causing massive explosions, but the attacks fail to penetrate them. Soon, a report arrives stating that even warship A-11, equipped with insulating armor, failed in its attempt to break in and is awaiting further instructions. Faced with this, Captain Xiao Li informs Prime Minister Cheng Xin that the thundercloud barrier indiscriminately attacks any object that approaches it, so forcing their way inside at that moment would only increase their losses. Therefore, the safest strategy is to wait for the electromagnetic cannon to arrive and then try to open a passage in a single strike. She also reports that the Heroes Association has sent reinforcements. Cheng Xin immediately orders all warships to cooperate with the association's heroes and assist with the rescue operation, making it clear that the safety of the citizens must come before anything else. Despite maintaining a firm demeanor in front of his subordinates, inwardly he can think only of Cynthia and Sinmia, praying that his two daughters are safe. Meanwhile, on the island, several civilians continue running through the chaos, and some end up surrounded by monsters with nowhere left to escape. Suddenly, something flashes through the area and eliminates the threat before the monsters can attack. The survivors are stunned, and when they look up, they recognize Shining Star, immediately cheering because they believe they are finally saved. The S-rank hero asks everyone to remain calm and explains that he has already sent a map containing the evacuation routes to each of their terminals. He tells the citizens to head immediately to the air raid shelters marked on the map and assures them that he will coordinate the students from the Superpower Academy and the guards still on the island to protect them along the way. Elsewhere, on the island, Schwantian realizes that the Gravity King is focused on him and takes advantage of it to tell everyone nearby to flee immediately, saying that he will stay behind and hold him off alone. When the people recognize the S-rank monster standing before them, they panic, shouting that it is the Gravity King, and that if he is there, they are all doomed. Schwantian then tries to attack, but the king begins using his powers and asks how a piece of trash like him dares to resist in his presence. He says that he is imposing 5 times normal gravity over the entire area, making the protagonist feel a crushing pressure. Even under those conditions, the Hun Yuan bracelet keeps advancing toward the enemy as though his ability does not even exist. The Gravity King catches the bracelet, but immediately realizes that something is strange. It clearly has a physical form, so it should have been affected by gravity like any other object. Looking more closely, he notices some kind of energy coating the artifact and preventing his power from penetrating it. Meanwhile, Schwantian can barely withstand the crushing force as he can hardly move. The monster then asks what kind of trash Schwantian just threw at him, and at that moment, the protagonist also realizes that the bracelet neither fell nor lost speed after the gravity increased. This reminds him of the difference between immortal treasures and ordinary objects. He concludes that the reason must be the spiritual aura contained within those artifacts. Ji Shi Zi had already explained that the density of aura is far greater than that of the energy used by superpowers, and Schwantian begins putting the pieces together. If aura has a higher energy density, then it does not merely serve to fuel immortal techniques. Depending on how it is used, it can also confront and neutralize superpowers and even directly interfere with abilities that act on physical matter, exactly like that monster's gravity. Finally, understanding the principle, Schwantian begins releasing his own aura around his body, using spiritual energy as a layer to resist his opponent's ability. Little by little, he feels the pressure on him lessen. His body is still extremely heavy, but he is no longer completely suppressed like before, which makes the protagonist even more confident. The Gravity King, on the other hand, remains furious and demands that Schwantian immediately tell him what he just launched at him. Even while nearly pinned to the ground, the protagonist does not miss the chance to provoke him and asks if that is really how he asks someone for something. The Gravity King grows even more enraged and tells him to stop acting self-righteous, saying that if he wants to lecture someone, he should first manage to stand up. He then mocks him further, saying that Schwantian is lying there like a dog. He keeps sneering, saying that those so-called heroes are nothing more than a bunch of arrogant trash. Convinced that Schwantian will soon give in, he increases his ability to 10 times normal gravity and thinks that at that level, even the organs of a high-level B-rank hero would burst within just 3 seconds. But the protagonist begins resisting the pressure and replies that he does not know whether heroes are arrogant or not, but the one being an unbearable nuisance is the Gravity King himself. Little by little, Schwantian forces his body upward and tells the monster to stop barking like a dog because it is already hurting his ears. The Gravity King is surprised to see that he can actually resist at that level, but quickly asks what difference that makes and increases the pressure again, this time to 15 times normal gravity. An even greater force crashes down on the protagonist, yet Schwantian continues enduring it. The monster begins wondering what is going on and whether that boy's strength could actually be above A rank. Meanwhile, Schwantian rises again and asks whether that is already his limit. Irritated, the Gravity King increases it once more, reaching 20 times normal gravity. But even then, the protagonist manages to hold on. He continues forcing himself upright and taunts the monster, saying that the famous Gravity King, an S-rank monster, is apparently nothing more than an incompetent brute raging like a beast with nothing else to show. The Gravity King cannot understand how this is possible because Schwantian is slipping further and further out of his control. Even so, he believes that although Schwantian managed to endure it this time, he will not be able to do so again. Enraged, he launches an attack saying that he will tear him to pieces and crush him. ZZZ immediately warns her disciple to be careful, and Schwantian narrowly avoids the first strike. Seeing the destruction caused by the attack, he realizes that the technique is far more dangerous than simply increasing the pressure around him. If he is hit directly, his aura barrier will be shattered instantly, and even his body could be completely twisted apart by the force of gravity. The Gravity King keeps attacking with his ability and tells the protagonist to go to hell, but Schwantian replies that he should not jump to conclusions so quickly and counters with the cloud-piercing finger, neutralizing the beast's attack. This shocks the monster, who thinks that Brat still had such a powerful technique up his sleeve. However, after seeing the Gravity King dodge it, Schwantian realizes that continuing like this will not work, so he needs to find another strategy. The protagonist begins moving rapidly toward the forest, making the Gravity King think that he deliberately chose that route to use the trees to conceal his movements. Even so, the monster believes all that resistance is pointless and begins using his powers to attack the forest while taunting Schwantian, asking what the point of standing up was if he is now hiding like a rat. He even says that the protagonist does not come close to those heroes he had called trash. Schwantian clearly understands his opponent's intention. The Gravity King is trying to anger him into responding and revealing his position, so he decides not to fall for the provocation and continues moving in silence. As she watches everything unfold, she realizes that Schwantian is covering his entire body with aura to resist the gravity, something extremely demanding for a cultivator. On top of that, maintaining such speed for too long should affect the stability of the barrier, and if he makes even the slightest mistake, the Gravity King will discover his location. But suddenly, she realizes that her disciple has done something different. Schwantian has refined the aura concentrated around his legs, increasing its density to boost his speed even further. And that is not all. Even while moving at high speed, he continues carefully controlling the energy around his body. The aura barrier surrounding him is becoming thinner and more concentrated, which means its density has reached a much purer level, and Schwantian's control over his aura is becoming far more precise. ZZZ is impressed by the protagonist's ability to concentrate and comprehend, as he is learning to adapt the use of aura in the middle of the battle itself. With that, she confirms that Schwantian truly is a combat genius, and his master even boasts that she had an excellent eye when choosing a vessel with so much potential. The Gravity King continues attacking the forest and begins to find it strange that, even without reducing the pressure over the area, Schwantian is moving faster and faster. Irritated, he admits that his strength has been greatly reduced because he divided his power among several clones. But even so, it makes no sense that it is taking him this long to deal with a mere brat. After launching several attacks without managing to find him, the monster briefly stops his offensive, and Schwantian immediately realizes that this is the opportunity he has been waiting for. The protagonist leaps up and appears behind the monster, asks why his opponent suddenly stopped like that, and then appears in front of him, landing a direct hit. Without giving him any room to react, Schwantian continues attacking with a barrage of blows, pressuring the Gravity King while mocking him that his ability is not even enough to make him take the fight completely seriously. After another series of attacks, the protagonist lands a powerful blow and slams the monster into the ground. However, the Gravity King gets back up in a rage and tells the boy not to get so full of himself, saying that now he will show him his true power. An enormous amount of energy begins gathering around him, and soon a violent pressure spreads throughout the entire area, sending the protagonist flying. Even so, Schwantian manages to grab onto a branch and regain his balance. After getting back up, Schwantian realizes that the defensive system of his cloak has finally reached its limit and grows frustrated that he still has not found a weakness in his opponent, admitting that this guy really is a monster. Hearing that, the Gravity King appears behind him and starts laughing, saying that Schwantian is right because he truly is a monster. Without the slightest remorse, he says that he loves killing people and has already slaughtered countless humans, so the protagonist should hurry up and die as well. Schwantian replies that if that is the case, then he will eliminate him that very day, because destroying evil monsters is also part of a hero's job. But the Gravity King questions that idea, asking whether monsters are born destined to be evil and whether they should be killed by humans simply because they were born as part of that race. The protagonist answers that eliminating him has absolutely nothing to do with his race. The problem is the things he chose to do. Even so, the Gravity King calls humans hypocrites and claims that they were the ones who turned him into that killing machine. He then remembers his past when he was born in a small village, devastated by war on the border between human and monster territory. From an early age, he lived in a completely unequal society. Even when he tried to help humans, the people around him reacted with fear, contempt, and disgust simply because he was a monster. On one occasion, while protecting humans, he met a hero named Olga, who found it curious to see such a weak monster, one who could barely clench his own fists, trying to protect people. Even so, Olga approached him and suggested that the two of them work together. He told him that he should not keep trying to solve everything alone, and that if he became a hero like him, people would stop looking at him that way. The young Gravity King believed those words. At the time, he thought that if he could become a true hero, perhaps he could change the prejudice humans held against monsters. But sometime later, he ended up discovering what Olga truly thought of him. While talking with other people, the hero made it clear that he had never considered that monster a friend. The only reason he had suggested forming a partnership was because he wanted to use him as a shield. If Olga were ever in danger, he knew the monster would rush to protect him and end up sacrificing himself in his place. After discovering that, the Gravity King realized that all his efforts to earn the humans' trust had been nothing more than a huge joke. From that moment on, he began to believe that monsters would always be seen as nothing more than monsters no matter what they did. To him, there was no longer any reason to keep trying to please humans because his fate had already been decided the moment he was born. And if humans had always felt entitled to define him and treat him however they wanted, he began to think that he could do exactly the same to them. Over time, he started attacking people without mercy. As humans begged to be spared, the Gravity King realized that the looks of contempt and disgust had disappeared and been replaced by complete fear and submission. To him, that feeling was wonderful, and that was how he began to find pleasure in making humans panic before him. Returning to the fight, Schwantian suddenly appears in front of the monster and asks whether he has finally finished telling that story before landing a direct punch to his face. The Gravity King recovers and says that the protagonist could never understand his situation because he was born human in a world filled with happiness and never had to carry what he calls a sin from birth. Because of that, he tells Schwantian to take that empty and boring dream of becoming a hero with him and go reflect on everything in hell. The Gravity King then gathers an enormous amount of power and launches his strongest attack at the protagonist. But Schwantian stands firm and replies that the one who needs to reflect is the monster himself. He uses the Touty Immortal technique to begin absorbing all that energy. The Gravity King is completely shocked because that attack contained practically all of his strength. Yet Schwantian is still managing to neutralize it with ease. The protagonist simply replies that there are many things in this world far beyond his understanding. He attacks violently, but the Gravity King dodges and quickly starts mocking him again, saying that Schwantian still intends to use the same moves as before against him. He admits that the technique is indeed powerful, but the protagonist's attacks have already become far too obvious, making them easy to avoid. Schwantian, however, merely smiles and replies that if that is the case, then the monster should try dodging one more time. He launches his attack toward the king again and uses the cloud-piercing finger once more. This time, however, the attack disappears from sight and reappears behind him, catching the monster by surprise. He then tries to close his wings to protect himself, and an enormous explosion erupts from the impact. Watching the scene, Schwantian immediately realizes that his plan has finally worked, but suddenly he notices something that shocks him. Even after being hit, the Gravity King manages to stand back up, wondering what just happened. However, he notices a branch with one of Schwantian's Hunyuan bracelets attached to it, and realizes that the protagonist did not have only one of those weapons. In fact, throughout the fight, Schwantian had pretended that he was merely dodging attacks, but he had actually used his movements to position another Hunyuan bracelet behind a tree and prepare an ambush. After realizing this, the monster trembles with rage and admits that the protagonist truly knows how to get under his skin. Unwilling to leave any more room for tricks, the Gravity King raises his arms and activates a new technique called gravitational trap. At that instant, several pillars of purple energy begin crashing down around the forest like gravitational bombs falling from the sky. Seeing this, Schwantian immediately realizes that something is wrong. But before he can do anything, the entire area is sealed by the technique, and a brutal pressure comes crashing down on him. The Gravity King then reveals that the gravitational trap was formed through the combined effect of 12 gravitational bombs and that the pressure inside has been doubled as well. With that, he prepares his final attack and confidently declares that Schwantian no longer has any way to escape. Lying in the center of the trap, the protagonist thinks in frustration that he cannot move his body even slightly and admits that he never expected the enemy to still be hiding such a troublesome technique. As he tries to endure it, the pressure keeps pushing his body deeper and deeper into the ground, making it clear that if this continues, he is screwed. At that moment, however, the Gravity King launches his powerful finishing blow, sending an enormous mass of energy toward Schwantian. The protagonist realizes too late that he is completely trapped inside the technique, but just when everything seems lost, Shining Star suddenly appears in front of him and intercepts the attack with a powerful barrier. Both the protagonist and the Gravity King are shocked by the sight, and Shining Star looks at Schwantian and tells him that he was lucky he arrived in time. Meanwhile, at the Taoist temple on Mount Wudang, Qingmeng informs her father that she has already secretly instructed the nearby residents to hide, and that no one noticed her presence during the process. Zhao Su replies that, for now, that is all they can do, and that the rest will have to be left in the hands of the heroes. However, Qingmeng notices that the compass left behind by their ancestors will not stop moving back and forth, and asks whether it could have something to do with the chaos caused by the Gravity King. Zhao Shu explains that it is not, because that compass is an artifact left behind by the family's ancestors, and would not be affected by that kind of superpower. This leads him to consider two possibilities. Either one of their ancestors has returned, or other cultivators have appeared nearby. Unwilling to stand around waiting for an answer, Zhao Shu throws out a talisman and decides to investigate personally, asking Qingmeng to remain at the temple and look after the place while he is gone. She agrees, and her father quickly leaves the mountain. At the same time, in another part of the city, sirens echo through the streets as McCarter and Chelsea take advantage of all the chaos caused by the Gravity King. McCarter complains that everything is far too boring and asks whether there is even a single person there capable of giving him a decent fight. Chelsea blasts open the door ahead and explains that this is exactly the point of the operation. The plan works like the old trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain, since practically every available S-rank hero has been sent out to deal with the Gravity King's various appearances. With the main fighters drawn away, all they need to do is take advantage of the opportunity to steal the hero profiles their boss wants, and the mission will be complete. They then break into the information center, and Chelsea manages to reach the main system. After connecting his device to the terminal, he begins transferring the files, and a short while later the system confirms that all the data has been copied. Chelsea is even surprised by how easy it was to break through the facility's defenses. With the hero profiles finally in his hands, he removes the device and thinks that if he completes the mission without any problems, Monet will probably lift the punishment he placed on him. But just as he is about to leave, Chelsea senses something strange and, looking ahead, sees a talisman, catching him completely off guard. He immediately realizes that some kind of superpower is being used against him. Without thinking twice, Chelsea quickly retreats as he sees the talisman releasing energy, and an attack explodes exactly where he had been standing moments earlier. As soon as the dust settles, a man appears before him and thanks him for the help, saying that he made his job much easier by stealing all those profiles. It is Dongfang Yunshuo, Qingmeng's brother, who then says that, as a reward for his service, he can at least allow Chelsea to have a quick death. Chelsea is surprised by the appearance of the stranger and asks who he is, making it clear that killing him will not be as easy as he thinks. He immediately releases a huge amount of energy and launches a direct attack at Yunshuo, but he remains steady, using a barrier to block it. Right afterward, Yunshuo counters and activates a punishment technique, causing a golden formation to appear around Chelsea. He tries to move but quickly realizes that he cannot move his body at all. Yunshuo then demands that he hand over the device containing the files and says that if he does, he may let him go. Chelsea, however, is far more concerned about something else. He cannot understand who this man is, because all the available S-rank heroes should have been transferred to other regions precisely because of the Gravity King. Even so, this stranger's strength is terrifying and he cannot even break free from the technique restraining him. Unable to react, Chelsea begins suffering under the power of the formation and screams in pain as the energy around his body intensifies. In the middle of this, the device containing the hero profiles falls to the ground. Yunshuo then calmly picks it up and finally gets his hands on the information he wanted. With a smile on his face, he thinks that those files were only one part of his objective, because that is still not everything he wants. Meanwhile, Shining Star, still maintaining the barrier that just blocked the attack, asks whether Schwantian is all right. Only then does the protagonist get a better look at him and realize that he is standing before Shining Star, the S-rank hero ranked 7th in the Heroes Association. But before he can answer, Schwantian notices the Gravity King preparing another attack and shouts for the hero to be careful. A massive amount of energy explodes toward them as the monster mocks them, saying that all that hero nonsense is nothing but garbage and tells Shining Star to go to hell. The hero manages to react and summoning lightning says that this time he will be the one taking his opponent's life. The monster then launches several attacks in his direction, but Shining Star charges forward, dodging at high speed and managing to close the distance. He begins running around the Gravity King, leaving the monster surprised. Shining Star activates the 5-pointed star electric slash, forming a huge star of energy around the Gravity King and sending electricity coursing through the beast's entire body. Without giving him time to recover, Shining Star accelerates again and uses the lightning slash at high speed. However, the Gravity King manages to react. The instant the hero tries to continue advancing, the monster lands a punch that catches him by surprise. The Gravity King then mocks him, asking whether he really thought he could keep running like that inside a field with 12 times normal gravity. Seeing the hero being thrown away, Schwantian immediately shouts for Shining Star, but the Gravity King notices the distraction and charges at him, asking how he still has the energy to worry about someone else when he should be worrying about his own life. The monster launches an attack directly at Schwantian, but even after being knocked down, Shining Star moves quickly and steps in front of him to protect him. The blow strikes the hero with tremendous force and hits his helmet, shattering the protection that concealed his face. Schwantian looks at him and begins to recognize who is hidden beneath that identity, becoming completely shocked when he realizes that it is Yunshu. Injured by the attack, she looks at the protagonist and, with difficulty, calls Schwantian her brother and tells him to run away immediately. But while they are distracted, the monster takes advantage of the opportunity and prepares to attack again. Completely consumed by rage at seeing her hurt, Schwantian shouts Yunshu's name and turns his attention toward the Gravity King, demanding to know how that bastard dared to hurt his sister. At that moment, an overwhelming amount of spiritual energy begins erupting from inside his body. The power released by Schwantian suddenly surges and rushes directly toward the Gravity King, who is swallowed by that energy. Immediately afterward, a massive golden attack shoots toward the monster and causes an enormous explosion. Watching everything unfold, Ji Shi is shocked when she realizes what just happened. In that very moment of fury, Schwantian managed to break through his limit and finally entered the Foundation establishment stage. Meanwhile, Zhao Shu continues flying toward the battle. Following the compass, he notices that the artifact's movements are becoming increasingly intense and concludes that the person responsible must be on the island directly ahead. Suddenly, he sees an overwhelming power erupting and is stunned by its strength. At that same moment, even Yunshuo senses the presence and is puzzled by the aura that has just appeared, becoming curious about who it belongs to. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Schwantian glares at the Gravity King and swears that he will make him suffer a fate worse than death. The monster immediately notices the change as well. Sensing that the protagonist's aura has suddenly become several times stronger, he retreats and begins wondering what kind of power it is, realizing that he can no longer underestimate him. Right afterward, Schwantian disappears from where he was standing and charges forward at an unbelievable speed, catching the Gravity King by surprise. The protagonist then unleashes a slashing blow, making the monster scream in pain. Even so, the creature still tries to fight back and says that he will kill him. But Schwantian keeps up the pressure and strikes him again, sending the enemy flying with another impact. After that, the protagonist continues provoking him, asking whether that is really all the Gravity King can do when he's fighting seriously. Watching the scene, Ji Shi realizes what happened and is surprised to see that Schwantian forcibly absorbed the aura spread across the island to strengthen his own body. The protagonist continues gathering all of his power, and the irritated Gravity King mocks him, asking whether someone that weak still wants to play the hero. He then begins concentrating energy in his hands again, charges forward, and tells Schwantian to go to hell. But this time, the protagonist does not simply try to block or dodge. He begins using the Touty Immortal technique, leaving the Gravity King completely stunned. Then, an enormous mass of golden energy begins condensing above the protagonist, surrounded by lightning. In the next instant, that power crashes violently toward the monster, who has no time to react and begins screaming. The attack then strikes the Gravity King, triggering a gigantic explosion. When the dust finally begins to settle, the Gravity King is seen embedded among the rocks, surrounded by smoke and unable to say a word, clearly shocked by the power Schwantian has just demonstrated. Meanwhile, Ji Si watches with satisfaction, because the amount of energy he absorbed was so tremendous that even an S-rank hero would probably be unable to endure many clashes against him in that state. At that moment, Yunshu begins to regain consciousness, and Schwantian immediately notices that his sister has awakened. He rushes over and asks if she is all right, but Yunshu quickly gets up and, after hugging him in relief that he is safe, asks where the Gravity King is. The protagonist replies that he has already taken care of him, which puts his sister at ease. Yunshu then begins praising him, saying that, as expected of her brother, he really is amazing. She even starts to say that he is her hero, but quickly corrects herself and declares that Xuantian is the hero of all humanity. However, the Gravity King has not been completely defeated. Lying among the rocks, he hears those words and repeats the word hero with contempt. At that moment, Anna appears before him and remarks that things cannot end like this. Looking at the monster's condition, she mocks him, saying that the famous Gravity King apparently amounts to nothing more than this. Irritated, he asks whether Anna came just to ridicule him after everything that happened, but she replies that she was merely passing by and has no interest whatsoever in whether he lives or dies. Even so, Anna asks whether he is really willing to accept things ending this way and whether being defeated by a group of heroes feels that wonderful. The Gravity King realizes that she is trying to tell him something, and Anna approaches to explain. She reminds him that the enormous island is suspended at an absurd height, and that if he were to use his gravitational power to make it crash directly into the ocean, the impact would be devastating. The tsunami caused by the fall alone could reach a force comparable to tens of thousands of nuclear bombs, detonating simultaneously, putting practically the entire world in danger. Anna then asks whether he would not like to make all those people feel the same pain he felt and whether he truly does not want to force them to pay for the prejudice he endured throughout his life. Her words immediately bring back memories of Olga, saying that he had never considered him a friend, and that, in the end, a monster would always remain nothing more than a monster. All those memories of rejection and humiliation return at once, causing the Gravity King to clutch his head and scream in pain, until, completely consumed by resentment, he declares that he wants revenge. The pressure across the island then begins to increase dramatically, and after hearing that, Anna smiles with satisfaction, saying that it seems he has finally understood. She also says that she will find a place where she can peacefully enjoy the consequences of his revenge before saying goodbye. Meanwhile, in other parts of the island, the people still believe that the battle is over. The citizens celebrate the Gravity King's defeat and begin shouting that the heroes have won, thanking them for saving everyone. But the monster is still conscious and keeps repeating that he wants to make everyone feel his pain. He thinks that it is not only those heroes who deserve to pay. Everyone in that world needs to suffer for what they have done. And the Gravity King begins activating his ability once again. Xuantian immediately realizes that something is wrong, and Yunshu senses the change as well. Suddenly, the Gravity King increases his power to 1,000 times normal gravity, causing a monstrous pressure to spread across the entire island. Even the monster's own body begins to suffer from the strain, but he continues releasing power and screams for all the heroes to die along with him. The gravitational force engulfs the entire island, causing the ground and numerous buildings to crack while enormous chunks of rock break away. The situation changes completely within seconds. The guards begin leading the civilians away from the collapsing areas, telling everyone to follow the designated path without pushing. As huge sections of the island begin breaking apart, Yunshu shoots forward at high speed and holds up the island, trying to prevent it from continuing to fall. While Yunshu keeps trying to stop the island from plummeting, Xuantian quickly appears beside her, surprising his sister. She asks why he is there and whether he should not be dealing with the Gravity King, but the protagonist explains that the monster is already completely exhausted and even if he ignores him for now, he can barely move. Besides, Xuantian asks how he could possibly leave his own sister to face such a dangerous situation alone. Yunshu is moved by his arrival, but the tremendous pressure of the island continues pushing both of them downward. Xuantian tells his sister not to lose focus and asks her to hold on, concentrating all of his strength into his hands. Yunshu says she understands, and the two begin releasing their powers together to support the enormous mass. Even while exerting herself alongside her brother, she begins struggling under the pressure until Xuantian suddenly makes a decision without telling her. He creates a protective energy shield around Yunshu, separating her from him. She is shocked and immediately asks what he is doing, ordering the protagonist to release her. Xuantian replies that he alone is more than enough to stay there, and tells Yunshu to leave. However, she begins pounding against the barrier, refusing to go and saying that she wants to remain by her brother's side. Yunshu shouts that she always wants to be with him, and that if Xuantian intends to sacrifice his own life to save her, then she would rather die with him. Even after hearing that, the protagonist simply tells his sister to behave. He explains that in the past, he was always a useless brother, and that whenever he got himself into trouble, Yunshu was the one who had to come and clean up his mess, so she has already suffered enough because of him. But at least this time, Xuantian wants to be the one who protects her. Without giving his sister any more room to argue, the protagonist launches the shield surrounding her away from the island. Yunshu screams for her brother as she is carried away, but Schwantian simply watches her leave before turning all of his attention back to the enormous mass above him. Alone, he gathers his strength and continues trying to stop the island from crashing down. At that moment, the Gravity King questions why that boy is still resisting. He remembers that the island's fall is already practically inevitable, since it is descending at more than 100 kilometers per hour and its speed is still increasing. Furthermore, Schwantian should have understood this the moment he decided to send Shining Star away. Even if he puts all of his strength into stopping the fall, it will not be enough. The monster then asks why Schwantian still insists on remaining there alone. With the strength he currently possesses, surviving the island's impact with the ocean should not be that difficult, so he could simply abandon everyone and save his own life. He insists that there is no reason to stay there and waste his life for the sake of others. Even as the weight of the island presses down on him more and more, Schwantian replies that there is a very simple reason. He is a hero, and because of that, he will never back down. The protagonist continues exerting himself and explains that standing in front of those who are weaker and protecting them is exactly what a hero is supposed to do, asking whether something that simple is really so difficult to understand. Hearing that word again, the Gravity King becomes furious. He starts pounding the ground and cursing heroes, saying that all of them are nothing more than rotten, despicable creatures. In that entire world, only an idiot like Schwantian would still be capable of believing that true heroes actually exist. The monster even tells the boy to stop being stupid and not throw his life away for the sake of other people. But suddenly, a hand appears beside Schwantian's and begins helping him support the island again. Yunshu has returned. She tells the Gravity King that he is wrong because although selfishness is part of human nature, being able to overcome that very nature is exactly what turns someone into a true hero. Schwantian is surprised to see her beside him again and asks why she came back when he had told her to leave. She replies that she did not return alone because she intends to bring everyone back with her. The protagonist is confused by those words until he notices more people approaching. Siren appears accompanied by several heroes, telling the two of them to hold on because they are coming. Yunshu then explains that she used her speed to contact the Heroes Association and requests that every available reinforcement be sent to help. The Water Witch takes command and warns that the situation is urgent, ordering everyone to channel their energy into Shining Star and Schwantian. The heroes immediately obey, and several beams of energy begin converging toward the two siblings, increasing the force they can exert against the island. With those reinforcements, Schwantian and Yunshu continue struggling to stop the fall, but the pressure is still enormous. Some of the heroes begin shouting that they cannot hold on much longer, while others try to encourage the group, saying that it is just one enormous chunk of rock and that they only need to push a little harder to force it back up. Everyone continues pushing themselves to the limit, but Summer Island keeps descending toward the ocean. Siren realizes that they are losing the struggle and shouts in alarm that the island is going to fall, leaving the other heroes desperate. However, just when it seems there is no longer any way to prevent the impact, the island suddenly stops, only 1 centimeter above the water. Everyone is completely stunned, and some even begin wondering whether it was some kind of miracle. Schwantian also finds the sudden change strange and begins to suspect that something is going on. At that moment, the Gravity King appears completely exhausted among the rocks and tells the protagonist not to misunderstand. Breathing heavily, he says that he is helping only Schwantian, not those hypocritical heroes. After using the little strength he has left to help stop the fall, the monster collapses to the ground. Schwantian simply smiles and tells him he can say whatever he wants. But shortly afterward, the protagonist himself reaches his limit. Completely drained after everything he has just done, he loses his balance and falls from the island toward the sea. Yunshu sees her brother falling and tries to reach him, calling out to him, but Schwantian keeps plunging toward the ocean, causing his sister to scream desperately. 500 years earlier, an entire region was being consumed by flames. People ran desperately while crying for help and shouting that a monster was approaching. Amid the inferno, a massive winged creature covered in fire appears over the area, spreading even more destruction as its roars echo throughout the region. Sometime later, Schwantian suddenly opens his eyes. Still confused, he looks around and realizes that he is lying in a completely different room, surrounded by furniture and architecture in an Eastern style. Unable to understand where he has ended up, the protagonist even wonders whether there was a place like that on Summer Island. At that moment, Yunshu rushes into the room and is extremely relieved to see that her brother has finally awakened, saying that he nearly worried her to death. Schwantian is still lost and asks what happened for her to be reacting that way. Yunshu then reveals that an entire month has passed since he was rescued from the sea. The protagonist is completely shocked, repeating that he was unconscious for a whole month. His sister explains that when Siren found Schwantian at the bottom of the ocean, his breathing was extremely weak, and even the doctors believed there might no longer be any way to save him. Fortunately, sometime later, a Taoist priest appeared at the hospital, claiming that his family had a way to heal Xuantian. Since the doctors had practically run out of options, they decided to trust him and try that method. After hearing the whole story, the protagonist begins to understand why he woke up in such a different place, but he immediately remembers something even more important. He looks at Yunshu and asks what happened to the Gravity King. Yunshu reassures her brother, saying that he does not need to worry about the Gravity King because the monster now has a proper place to stay. As he looks at her, Xuantian realizes that his sister has changed quite a bit during that single month. Yunshu is noticeably thinner, worn out and exhausted, making it clear that she went through some difficult days while he remained unconscious. Feeling guilty, the protagonist apologizes for making his sister worry so much and thanks her for everything, saying that it was because of her that he was able to wake up. Yunshu replies that it was not that difficult and explains that, in fact, someone else deserves most of the credit for his recovery. Xuantian becomes curious and asks who she is talking about. At that moment, Qingmeng enters the room and greets him, saying that it has been quite a while since they last met. The protagonist immediately recognizes her and is completely surprised to see her there. He then looks again at the eastern style of the place, puts the pieces together and asks whether that means he is at her house. Qingmeng calmly confirms it, while Yunshu is also surprised to discover that her brother already knew the girl. But once Xuantian realizes exactly where he is, he immediately remembers Qingmeng's father. He thanks her for helping save his life, but quickly says that he thinks it would be better for him to leave as soon as possible. Inwardly, the protagonist can only think that if that overprotective father finds him inside his daughter's house again, this time there might not even be a whole body left to tell the story. Cheng Meng, however, replies somewhat awkwardly that even if he wants to leave, he cannot. And the reason is simple. Her father himself gave the order. Before Xuantian can understand what is happening, Zhao Xu appears behind him and calmly greets him. The man even takes the opportunity to tease him, introducing himself as that old-fashioned, overprotective father who is currently hosting the protagonist and apologizing for the terrible hospitality. Xuantian is left speechless when he realizes that Zhao Xu probably heard exactly what he was thinking. Sometime later, Zhao Xu personally checks the protagonist's condition and after taking his pulse concludes that he is already stable and no longer in danger. However, Xuantian still lost an enormous amount of energy, and at this rate, it will probably take another month for him to recover completely. Because of that, Zhao Xu orders him to get proper rest and also scolds Yunshu and Qingmeng, telling the two of them to stop fooling around near the patient and go get some rest themselves. Yunshu then says that she is going to wash up and wishes her brother good night, while Qingmeng also says goodbye, telling Xuantian that she will see him the next day. After everyone finally leaves, the protagonist awkwardly returns their farewells and waits until he is alone. As soon as the door closes, he locks himself in the room and immediately calls for CCZ, telling his master to come out already. CCZ calmly appears and, instead of asking how her disciple is doing, simply questions why he is still awake so late. Xuantian becomes indignant and asks whether she is serious, reminding her that her disciple nearly lost his life while trying to save the world. He says that after narrowly escaping death, that definitely should not be the first thing his master has to say. Shi Ji, however, does not seem worried in the slightest, and replies that he was never truly in danger. She explains that the reason Xuantian remained unconscious for so long was not because of some fatal injury, but because he absorbed an absurd amount of spiritual energy all at once. In fact, because of the protagonist, practically all the spiritual energy on Summer Island was drained, and it will probably take at least half a year for the place to recover what it lost. Xuantian is shocked to hear this, and asks whether he really absorbed enough energy to drain an entire island for 6 months. Shi Zi then says that if he does not believe her, all he has to do is sit down and try meditating. All that residual spiritual energy should still be accumulated inside his body. Although it entered his body in a completely chaotic manner, that enormous amount of energy ended up cleansing and opening his meridians, allowing his cultivation to advance even further while he was unconscious. Thanks to that, Xuantian has already reached the peak of the foundation establishment stage. The protagonist becomes extremely excited when he discovers that his trip to Summer Island ended up bringing such a huge surprise, and immediately asks how much longer it will take him to break through to the next level. Shi Zi replies that in his current state, advancing will not be difficult. As long as he continues absorbing new spiritual energy and properly combines it with the enormous reserve he brought back from Summer Island, he should be able to reach the Golden Core stage in approximately 10 days. Shi Zi further explains that once he finally surpasses Foundation Establishment and enters the Golden Core stage, even if he is only at the beginning of that realm, his true journey on the path of immortality can officially be considered to have begun. That breakthrough will also allow Xuantian to begin using a weapon that truly belongs to a cultivator, his own spiritual blade. The protagonist becomes curious and asks exactly what this spiritual blade is. Shi explains that every qualified cultivator, upon reaching the golden core stage, begins to possess a personal weapon that will be continuously nurtured, refined, and tempered alongside them. As the cultivator grows stronger, the weapon also becomes increasingly powerful. When a spiritual blade is properly cultivated, its master can reach a level of power capable of moving mountains and rivers and even destroying the heavens and the earth. After hearing this, Xuantian immediately becomes excited and asks what they are still waiting for, saying that he wants to begin training that very instant. Shi is pleased by her disciples' enthusiasm and says that this is exactly the attitude she likes to see. However, while they are talking, Zhao Shu is listening to everything from outside. Shi continues, saying that they were quite lucky because Mount Wudang can also be considered a blessed land rich in spiritual energy. Because of that, she knows a nearby place where Xuantian will be able to cultivate much more effectively. After hearing all of this, Zhao Su exclaims that it really was that brat who had been up to something. Shi then asks whether he is ready. Xuantian immediately confirms and excitedly announces that it is time to begin cultivating. They then start moving quietly, and Shi tells Xuantian to head toward the back of the mountain, explaining that the spiritual energy in that area is abundant and should be more than enough for his training. The two then quietly make their way there. On the way, Xuantian begins commenting that he has been to that part behind the mountain before and seems to remember something about the place. He asks whether they're heading in the right direction, but a moment later, when he looks ahead, his eyes widen as he notices something unexpected in front of them. Xuantian passes by one of the windows and, when he glances inside, realizes that Yunshu is taking a bath. He immediately ducks down so he will not be seen and becomes completely flustered, thinking that before he even realized it, his sister had already grown quite a lot. The protagonist even starts wondering what kind of man she will choose in the future, but quickly decides to stop thinking about it and get out of there as fast as possible, because if Yunshu finds out that he saw anything, she will probably kill him. Xuantian then continues sneaking through the temple, but suddenly stops when he hears a death threat. In reality, it is Qing Meng, who is asleep and threatening to kill someone in her dreams. Realizing that it is only that, the protagonist lets out a relieved sigh and the girl begins moving around in her sleep while muttering threats, asking someone where they think they are running off to and saying that she is going to kill them. She turns over in bed again and keeps talking about eliminating her target and completing a mission, putting Xuantian in yet another extremely awkward situation. Not even knowing where to look, he becomes so nervous that his nose starts bleeding and decides that he has already seen more than he should have. The protagonist then runs away before the girl wakes up. Without him realizing it, however, Zhao Xu has already noticed the strange movement and watches Xuantian heading toward the back of the mountain. A short while later, Xuantian and Shi finally arrive at a hidden area near a large waterfall. The protagonist asks whether this is really the place they were looking for, and his master confirms it, surprised by the enormous amount of spiritual energy concentrated in the area. Xuantian immediately understands why the Dongfang family chose to live on that mountain for so long, while Shi remarks that the place can truly be considered a blessed land. But the protagonist does not want to waste any more time talking and says that cultivation is more important. Xuantian then positions himself near the source and begins meditating. Following his master's instructions, he first needs to feel the pulsations of the spiritual energy around him and guide that energy through his body for one complete cycle. Only after that can he condense all the energy he previously absorbed on Summer Island inside his dantian and then circulate it for another 36 cycles. At first, everything goes exactly as it should. Xuantian notices that his breathing is extremely steady and thinks that if he can maintain that rhythm, the process will probably proceed without any problems. He remains focused, guiding the energy through his body, but before he can even complete the first cycle, the same enormous bird from before appears in his consciousness, charging toward him as though it wants to devour him. Xuantian's concentration immediately collapses, and his breathing becomes completely chaotic. GCZ notices at once and asks what happened for his energy flow to suddenly become so unstable. Still panting, the protagonist replies that he does not know either. Everything had been going perfectly, and he had not even finished circulating the energy once when those red eyes suddenly appeared in front of him, seemingly belonging to a monster that wanted to swallow him whole. GZZ is intrigued because she has never heard of anything like this before. As far as she knows, no other cultivator has ever experienced such a strange situation during cultivation. However, before she can reach any conclusion, a voice comes from behind them asking whether Xuantian has already encountered that creature. The protagonist turns around in surprise and realizes that Zhao Su followed him there. Zhao Su remarks that if Xuantian has already encountered it, then the situation will be even easier to explain. He reveals that what the protagonist just saw is the shadow of a monster sealed inside that spiritual spring. The seal keeping it imprisoned has begun to loosen, allowing the creature to devour the chaotic spiritual energy in the area. And that is exactly why Schwantian was unable to absorb the energy there normally. Hearing words like monster, spiritual spring, and seal, Schwantian realizes that Zhao Su knows far more about that place than he had imagined. Even so, he immediately pretends not to understand, asking what the man is talking about. Not wanting to reveal that he came out in the middle of the night specifically to cultivate, the protagonist laughs awkwardly and makes up an excuse, saying that he simply could not sleep and decided to go for a walk. Zhao Shu kneels down and tells Xuantian to stop pretending, saying that he had already figured everything out after the Summer Island incident and is now certain that he is not mistaken. To the protagonist's surprise, he declares that Xuantian is precisely the child mentioned in an ancient prophecy, the one destined to save the Dongfang family, and says that every member of the clan welcomes the so-called Son of God. Xuantian is completely lost after hearing this revelation, wondering what this whole Son of God story is about, and how the situation ended up taking such a strange turn. Zhao Xu then decides to explain everything from the beginning. Thousands of years ago, during an era marked by a great famine and the uncontrolled emergence of demons, humans rose up to fight them and, in the process, began awakening different kinds of powers. Humanity's evolution eventually followed two distinct paths. On one side were those who were naturally gifted and relied on their awakened abilities to fight, becoming the predecessors of today's superheroes. On the other side were those who learned to harness the natural energies of the world for battle, and these were the ancestors of the Dongfang family, remembered in history as great immortals. Hearing this, Xuantian immediately speaks to Shi Cizi mentally and asks whether Zhao Su is talking about cultivation, because that would mean other cultivators existed in that world long ago. His master replies that she never said he was the only immortal cultivator in existence, and tells her disciple to simply keep listening, because anything he still does not understand can be explained afterward. Zhao Su continues, saying that for thousands of years the two groups fought side by side against the demons. When that long war finally ended, the leaders of the two factions signed a peace treaty and divided their territories, drawing a border to prevent further conflict. For approximately 1,000 years, the world remained relatively peaceful, but the two sides had completely different views of existence. Superpower users believed that humanity should conquer the heavens and claim the world for itself, while cultivators believed that all things possessed spiritual energy and should coexist as equals. Because of these differences, small clashes between the two factions continued for centuries until another war was on the verge of breaking out. To prevent countless lives from being destroyed again, the more pacifistic cultivators decided to open a new realm and voluntarily abandon that world. Hearing this part of the story, the protagonist looks at Shi Cizi, who simply remains silent. Zhao Su then reveals that his ancestor, Dongfang Tianjun, was one of the exceptions and chose to stay behind. However, even after remaining there, Tianjun understood that as long as his descendants continued following the ideals of cultivation, they would hardly be accepted by superpower users. The events that followed confirmed his fears as their ancestors began suffering discrimination. Because of this, Dongfang Tianjun traveled across several regions before finally choosing that mountain as a place to live in isolation. He also established an ancestral rule that the Dongfang family should have no contact with the outside world, and thus the clan withdrew from society. Over time, the conflicts between superheroes and cultivators nearly came to an end, but that peace did not last forever either. About 100 years ago, an enormous creature called Yeju suddenly appeared. The same monstrous bird Xuantian had seen during his meditation began destroying the city without restraint, and in just 1 hour, turned roughly a quarter of it into a vast area devastated by flames. The Heroes Association reacted quickly and gathered the most powerful fighters of that era to confront Yeju. At first, everyone believed that by working together, they would be able to eliminate the monster, but they soon discovered something terrifying. No matter how many times it was defeated, Yeju kept coming back to life, and every time it resurrected, its strength increased even further. Little by little, the heroes began losing ground until they were completely defeated, and fear and despair took hold of everyone. At the most critical moment of the battle, the ancestors of the Dongfang family, who had been watching everything from afar, finally realized the creature's true intention. Yeju had not appeared by chance, but was heading directly toward the Dongfang family and their spiritual spring. Hearing that name, Xuantian mentally asks Shi Cizi what exactly a spiritual spring is. His master explains that this is the name given to places where spiritual energy is heavily concentrated, energy that can be understood as the power of the earth itself and one of the origins of all life. This energy flows throughout the world like an enormous river, spreading everywhere. However, unlike water, it does not simply flow into the ocean, evaporate, and return as rain in a constant cycle. As it flows, spiritual energy accumulates far more heavily in certain regions than in others, and places with such enormous concentrations can also be called spiritual springs. Ji Shi reveals that Summer Island itself was one of those places, which is precisely why Xuantian was able to absorb such an absurd amount of energy during the battle against the Gravity King. The protagonist finally understands and concludes that if Yeju was after the spiritual spring, then it was probably able to resurrect countless times because it kept absorbing that enormous amount of energy. Zhao Xu confirms that this is exactly the case. He explains that although his ancestors chose to live in isolation, they also had interests of their own. Dongfang Tianjun altered the natural flow of spiritual energy in that region and caused a much greater amount of it to gather around Mount Wudong to make cultivation easier for the family. However, it was precisely this enormous concentration that ended up attracting Yeju. Zhao Shu admits that, in a way, the great catastrophe that occurred 100 years ago was caused by the Dongfang family itself. Fortunately, however, it was also thanks to their ancestors that the creature was eventually contained and sealed. Zhao Su continues explaining that after a fierce battle and with the help of the superheroes of that era, his ancestor finally managed to sever the veins that supplied the region with spiritual energy. Without that source to continue strengthening itself, Yeju was weakened and ultimately sealed inside the spiritual spring, which had already been nearly exhausted. Hearing this, Shi Zizi finally understands why the spiritual energy in that place disappeared so quickly whenever Xuantian cultivated. In reality, the Dongfang family's own ancestors had cut off the region's energy supply to prevent the monster from continuing to recover. The protagonist then asks whether the enormous bird that appeared in his consciousness while he was cultivating was truly Yeju, and Zhao Shu confirms it. He explains that after sealing the monster, his ancestor eventually died, but before doing so, he left behind a prophecy. According to him, 100 years later, the spiritual energy that had been interrupted would begin flowing again, and with it, the monster sealed inside the spiritual spring would also begin to awaken. However, at that same time, someone capable of preventing the tragedy would appear, a person from outside the Dongfang clan who, despite still having a relatively low cultivation level, would be able to comprehend cultivation methods and possess a majestic aura comparable to that of a heavenly emperor. Zhao Su then reveals that during the Summer Island incident, he saw Xuantian releasing that enormous amount of spiritual energy into the sky. Besides not belonging to the Dongfang family, his cultivation was still not particularly advanced, yet he was still able to control a gigantic amount of spiritual power. Because of this, Zhao Su believes there is no longer any doubt that the protagonist is the chosen one mentioned in the prophecy. Xuantian becomes completely confused and points at himself, asking whether he is really talking about him. Zhao Shu confirms it and adds that Xuantian absorbed an absurd amount of spiritual energy without suffering permanent damage to his body, proving that he is capable of withstanding the majestic force contained within the spiritual spring and, consequently, also has a chance of facing Yeju. Kneeling before him, Zhao Shu begs him to agree to help, saying that only Xuantian can carry out this task and that it concerns not only the two of them or the Dongfang family, but also the safety of countless people. The protagonist stares at the scene without even knowing how to react, mentally wondering who he is, where he is, and whether he can still simply leave, even beginning to suspect that Zhao Shu might be trying to scam him for some reason, whether for money or even his own body. Not knowing what to do, Xuantian asks him to stand up first and says they can discuss everything calmly, but Zhao Shu refuses, declaring that until the boy agrees, this old man will not get up from the ground. Xuantian explains that he is not simply refusing the proposal, but that the matter involves things far too important to make a decision impulsively. Furthermore, he now has ties to the Heroes Association and intends to explain the entire situation to Yunshu the following day so that she and the association can analyze the problem before any decision is made. Hearing the name of the Heroes Association, Zhao Su immediately becomes alarmed. He remembers that the teachings left by their ancestors require the Dongfang family to have as little contact as possible with superheroes and remain isolated, so he begins hesitating at the idea of revealing the entire situation to them. Xuantian notices this and says that if Zhao Su is still trapped by that old way of thinking, then perhaps he really cannot help him. The protagonist stands up and explains that after everything he has experienced so far, he has learned one important thing. One person cannot solve everything alone. He recalls his battles against the Deep Sea King and the Gravity King, acknowledging that to someone watching from the outside, it might seem as though he performed several miracles and accomplished impossible things all by himself. But the truth is very different. If it had not been for Dongxia's sacrifice and the help of so many other heroes, Xuantian would probably have died a long time ago. Zhao Xu then asks whether this means that not even he is certain he can defeat Yeju. Xuantian replies that he is not, then immediately asks another question, wondering whether Zhao Xu intends to allow Qingmeng to participate in the operation. The man rejects the idea immediately, saying that it would be impossible because, with his daughter's current abilities, placing her in front of that monster would practically be sending her to her death. Determined, Zhao Xu declares that it is enough for him to accompany Xuantian, and that even if something happens to his own life, the Dongfang family bloodline can still continue through Qingmeng. Xuantian merely grunts and asks whether he truly believes that would solve anything. He asks whether, if Qingmeng later discovered that her father hid everything from her because he believed she could not help, Zhao Xu would truly be satisfied if his daughter spent the rest of her life carrying guilt and sorrow because she had not been by his side. Zhao Xu has no answer, and Xuantian continues saying that he wants to protect Qingmeng precisely because he cares about her, but he should understand that Qingmeng herself probably feels exactly the same way about her father. The protagonist then asks why anyone necessarily has to die if there is a possibility of solving everything and having everyone return alive. To him, the ancient teachings and the prejudice between cultivators and superheroes should not be more important than finding a solution to that threat. Xuantian makes it clear that he has no intention of watching someone fall before his eyes again, not even one more time. His words leave Zhao Xu completely stunned, and he simply stares at the protagonist while once again thinking about that so-called son of heaven. Later that night, an alarm clock rings and Qingmeng, who had been sleeping, opens her eyes. The girl quickly gets up and secretly leaves her room, moving silently through the corridors. Yunshu, who is still awake, notices Qingmeng leaving and becomes curious, wondering where she could possibly be going at that hour. Qingmeng continues running away from the residence and heads toward an isolated area of the mountain. Someone is already waiting for her there. When he sees her approaching, Yunshuo smiles and says that he knew she would eventually show up, and that deep down he was certain she would agree to help him. The man then looks directly at Qingmeng and calls her his little sister. 10 years earlier at the Dongfang family residence, a tragedy deeply affected Qingmeng and Yunshuo. Their mother stops breathing, and as little Qingmeng desperately calls out to her, Zhao Su orders one of the servants to take his children out of the room. Shortly afterwards, some of the servants begin lamenting the woman's early death and mention that there was a doctor at Yamashita Hospital with an extremely effective superpower for treating that kind of illness. In their opinion, if the family had gone down the mountain and sought out that man earlier, perhaps she could still have been saved. The servant immediately tells everyone to be quiet, reminding them that members of the Dongfang family are forbidden from leaving the mountain and that it would be better not to let Zhao Su hear that kind of conversation. When they notice the housekeeper approaching, the servants become frightened and quickly make up an excuse that they were going to take care of the funeral preparations before fleeing the area. The housekeeper then approaches the two siblings and tries to comfort them, saying that death is part of the cycle of heaven and that their mother simply left before them. So one day she will still be waiting for the two of them. Little Qingmeng asks if that is really true, and the woman confirms it, saying that once she cultivates enough, she will be able to meet her mother again. Qingmeng immediately believes her and becomes excited, deciding that she will start training with all her strength from that very moment. Yunshuo, however, already understands that this is nothing more than an attempt to comfort his sister. After Qingmeng walks away, he tells the housekeeper that the story might fool her, but it does not work on him. Yunshuo knows that with the level of cultivation his mother possessed, she could never have become immortal, so her soul had probably already dispersed completely. The housekeeper tries to interrupt him, but the boy raises his head and says that this is actually wonderful news. He insists that he is not sad and says that he is even relieved that his mother finally managed to escape that house, which to him was nothing more than a true hell. Back in the present, Qingmeng finds Yunshuo and asks about the message he had sent to her. She wants to know whether it is true that her brother has really found a way to remove the seal from the spiritual spring. Watching from a distance, Yunshu wonders what they are talking about. Yunshuo confirms it without showing any concern, saying that the only thing left in that house forgotten by the world is precisely the monster imprisoned there. Realizing his intentions, Qingmeng asks in alarm whether he truly intends to release that creature, reminding him that Zhao Zhu has spent all this time preparing to seal it again, even if he has to sacrifice his own life to do so. Just hearing his sister mention their father makes Yunshuo lose his patience, and he orders her not to speak of that man because, to him, Zhao Shu does not even deserve to be called a father. He then asks Cheng Meng if she knows how many trees there are in the forest behind the estate. The girl does not understand the question, so Yunshuo reveals that when he left that place 3 years ago, there were exactly 764 trees there. Cheng Meng does not understand why her brother would know something so specific, and Yunshuo explains that for 18 years, that forest was practically the only thing he had to keep him company. And it was not only him. The entire Dongfang family had to blindly obey the clan's ancient rules, living isolated in that place without being able to interact normally with the outside world. After spending 21 years living that way, Yunshuo says there is one question he has never been able to get out of his mind. Why? He does not understand why he and the entire family must continue enduring that kind of life, much less why they should remain afraid of superheroes simply because of orders left behind by their ancestors. Cheng Meng tries to defend their father, reminding him that Zhao Su at least allowed Yunshuo to leave the mountain, see the outside world, and experience a different life, so she believes he has always treated her brother very well. But Yunshuo becomes even more irritated and asks whether she really calls that being treated well. To him, Zhao Shu merely granted him something that every ordinary person outside already possesses from birth, the freedom to live normally. Yunshuo then asks Cheng Meng to remember their childhood, the mother who died tragically, and the entire life they were forced to endure in that family. Finally, he asks whether his sister truly intends to follow the same path as their mother, remaining trapped by those rules for her entire life until death becomes the only way she can finally obtain freedom. The girl tries to calm her brother, but suddenly a voice appears, telling him to leave Cheng Meng alone. Yunshuo turns around in surprise and finds Shining Star standing at the top of a tree. She scolds him for treating a girl that way and says that even if he is her brother, what he is doing is completely unacceptable. Because of that, she orders Yunshuo to release her immediately, no matter what his reasons are. Yunshuo recognizes Shining Star and is somewhat surprised to find her in that area of all places. Even so, he releases Cheng Meng and calls the heroine a meddler. Soon afterward, however, he realizes that her arrival may actually be convenient. If he eliminates Shining Star right then, not only will there be less resistance when Yejiu resurrects, but he will also have one less problem to deal with when the time comes to confront the Heroes Association. Cheng Meng is shocked to hear this and realizes that her brother's intentions are far more serious than she imagined. Yunshuo then begins radiating a dark aura and declares that she will be the first hero to die because of his grand plan, but certainly not the last. Suddenly, lightning begins striking the area as Shining Star attacks at incredible speed. She then launches an even stronger attack, but when the energy dissipates, Shining realizes that the blow had almost no effect because Yunshuo managed to withstand it, using that strange energy surrounding his body. Seeing that a direct attack did not work, Shining Star changes strategies and fires multiple attacks at once from several different angles. Even after taking the barrage, Yunshuo remains steady and simply watches the heroine's movements. He asks if that is really all the strength Shining Star has and mocks her, saying that it is nothing more than mediocre. Shining is surprised by how easily he withstood it, but Yunshuo has no intention of giving her time to think. He announces that now it is his turn and begins performing some kind of ritual, reciting a sequence of words as dark energy starts to emerge. As the technique progresses, several ghostly forms begin appearing across the battlefield. Shining Star looks around without fully understanding what is happening, while Cheng Meng watches her brother with concern. Yunshuo continues the invocation and calls upon the spirits to assist him. With the technique finally complete, Yunshuo orders those entities to advance and devour Shining Star. The creatures immediately rush toward her in great numbers, crossing the battlefield. At the same time, Yunshuo continues feeding that energy and shouts for all living beings to die, focusing most of his fury on the heroine. More and more spirits emerge from the shadows and charge toward Shining Star as Yunshuo declares that they must rise at the call of the Dongfang clan. He says that he will use his own death and the family's revenge to show the world all the pain the Dongfang clan has carried for generations. Suddenly, the rocks around Yunshuo begin to rise and shatter, and Cheng Meng, seeing her brother moving further and further down that path, holds Shining Star in her arms and begs him to stop. Yunshuo, however, has no intention of backing down. He asks contemptuously whether his sister expects him to repay all the injustices he suffered with kindness, and if so, how he is supposed to repay those who were actually kind to him. He then releases even more power, sending the two of them flying. Yunshuo resumes the ritual and summons a colossal skull made of energy. He orders the technique to finish Shining Star once and for all and launches a massive attack at her. Cheng Meng screams for her brother when she realizes what he is doing. while Yunshu also understands that she will not be able to avoid the attack in time. However, before the technique can hit her, Xuantian appears and uses the cloud-piercing finger, causing his attack to directly disperse Yunshuo's energy. Both Qingmeng and Yunshu are surprised to see the attack destroyed. Soon afterward, Xuantian lands at the scene, and Yunshu immediately recognizes her older brother. On the other side, Yunshuo is even more shocked. In his thoughts, he realizes that Xuantian just destroyed the howl of the purification god, using only one of his simplest techniques, making him wonder where that boy came from and how he obtained such strength. Without paying attention to the enemy at first, Xuantian runs to Yunshu and asks if she is all right, helping his sister back to her feet. Yunshu explains that thanks to Qingmeng, she only suffered a few scratches. Hearing that, the protagonist immediately asks which bastard attacked his sister. Yunshu becomes a little awkward and hesitates to answer, but Xuantian soon notices Yunshuo standing ahead, and his expression changes completely. He asks how that guy dared to hurt Yunshu and begins gathering energy, making it clear that whoever is responsible is dead for laying a hand on his sister. Seeing that Xuantian is about to attack, Qingmeng runs in to intervene and asks him to let her explain, saying that Yunshuo is not a bad person. Her brother is surprised to hear her defend him, and Qingmeng asks Yunshuo to explain to Xuantian and the others that everything was just a misunderstanding. Yunshuo looks at his sister and seems to hesitate for a moment, beginning to say something. However, before he can finish, another furious voice suddenly echoes through the area. It is Zhao Shu who has finally arrived, and, after seeing the situation, confirms that Yunshuo really was the one behind everything. The father begins scolding him harshly, asking how he dared use the 8 divine techniques left behind by the family's ancestors in such a way. Zhao Su reminds him that he was the one who personally taught those techniques to his son, and asks whether Yunshuo really believes they were passed down to be used like that. On top of that, he realizes that Yunshuo managed to activate them by drawing on the power of the sealed monster, and becomes even more furious, asking whether his son is trying to anger him to death. Qingmeng immediately tries to intervene, asking her father to listen and making it clear that there is an explanation for what her brother did. Zhao Zhu, however, does not allow her to continue. He tells his daughter to be quiet and stay out of the way, saying that she has no right to interfere in that conversation, and ends up knocking Qingmeng to the ground as he pushes her aside. Seeing this, Yunshuo freezes completely for a moment, but his expression quickly changes, and he stares at his father with even greater rage, unable to believe what he just witnessed. To him, none of the earlier argument matters anymore, because Zhao Su just raised a hand against Qingmeng, and that is something Yunshuo clearly has no intention of accepting. Zhao Su, however, shows no tolerance and slaps his son, calling him ungrateful and ordering him to kneel because he will be punished that day for everything he has done. Hearing the word punishment, Yunshuo begins laughing uncontrollably and asks what right his father has to punish him. Then, dark energy erupts around the two of them. Yunshuo says that if anyone there needs to reflect on their actions, it is his father, and he strikes him with his technique. Qingmeng desperately cries out for her father, while Xuantian immediately moves to stop Yunshuo. Yunshu also tells her brother to stop him as quickly as possible, but Yunshuo creates an energy barrier, saying that he had better not even try to come any closer. The protagonist becomes irritated, and soon Fiery and Manyang also appear to block his path. Fiery tells Xuantian to stop while he still can, and Manyang warns that he will not take another step. Xuantian releases his energy and asks whether they really intend to stop him, but Yunshuo makes it clear that reaching him will not be so easy, even asking whether the protagonist is really that desperate to save that old man. Xuantian keeps trying to advance while Yunshuo looks at Zhao Su and calls him a stubborn, outdated, and useless old man. He then says that if Xuantian wants him so badly, he can have him, and throws his own father toward the protagonist. Xuantian manages to catch him before he falls, while Qingmeng once again cries out for Zhao Shu. Furious, the protagonist calls Yunshuo a bastard, but the young man simply tells him not to get so worked up, and announces that their fight will end there for the night because they will meet again. Fiery also mockingly says goodbye to Xuantian, while Manyang says that she will miss him. Before leaving, Yunshuo turns his attention back to Qingmeng and says that since she has no intention of helping him, he will no longer insist. However, after what happened that night, he believes his sister should finally have understood one important thing. Among the Dongfang family's 8 great divine techniques, Fate Reversal is the one capable of producing the most extreme results. Qingmeng is surprised to hear that, but Yunshuo offers no further explanation. Manyang then begins using a technique to leave the area, while Xuantian tries to chase them and shouts for them not to dare run away. However, dark energy spreads around Yunshuo and his allies, preventing the protagonist from reaching them. Yunshuo says that they will meet again and warns that next time, Xuantian will not be so lucky. Laughing as he leaves with Fiery and Manyang, he offers one final provocation, saying that this will happen if fate allows it. Later, at the Dongfang family residence, Xingxuan arrives looking for Yunshu and immediately becomes worried when she sees her injuries. She asks why, after such a huge incident, Yunshu did not contact her so she could take her into the city for treatment. Yunshu reassures her friend, explaining that she only suffered a few scratches and that the person truly in serious condition is the owner of the residence, Dongfang Jiaosu. She explains that Jiaosu's condition is deteriorating rapidly and that he needs continuous treatment. Even with all the care he is receiving, Yunshu fears that in his current condition he may not even make it through the next day. Xingxuan is shocked to learn that the situation is so serious, and Yunshu explains that this is precisely why she needs to stay there and stand guard. With Zhao Xu in that condition, someone might take advantage of the opportunity to attack again, so she has no intention of leaving the family unprotected. After that, Yunshu stands up and asks Xingxuan how the association president and the other heroes are doing. At that moment, Siren arrives with the others, informing Xingxuan that she did as requested and called everyone to the Dongfang family residence. Looking around, Siren is impressed that such an ancient building has managed to remain perfectly preserved. Yunshu notices the arrival of the Heroes Association president and immediately tries to stand to greet her, but the Water Witch tells her to forget the formalities, acknowledging that she has already done plenty of work. The president then apologizes to everyone for entering Taoist territory and admits that the fact Yunshuo managed to cause such a major disturbance also represents serious negligence on the association's part. Hearing that, Yunshu is surprised because she did not expect the president to know about Taoism and cultivators. Without dwelling on the subject, the Water Witch says that it would be better to get straight to the point and asks Yunshu to explain in greater detail everything she had previously reported. Before she can begin, however, Qingmeng offers to explain instead, revealing that gathering everyone there was her idea, and that since the situation also involves the old grievances between Taoists and superheroes, it will probably be easier if she tells the whole story herself. Inwardly, Qingmeng apologizes to her father for breaking the family rules, but she knows that at that moment, only the Heroes Association possesses enough strength to help them. The president agrees and listens to the entire story. About an hour later, after Qingmeng finishes explaining everything, the Water Witch understands that Yunshuo intends to remove Yejiu's seal, and realizes that this also explains the earlier theft. Qingmeng is shocked to discover that her brother stole information from the association, so the president explains that during the chaos caused by the Gravity King, enemies took advantage of the situation to attack headquarters. They managed to defeat the intruders, but part of the data stored on the central computer was copied. Until then, she had not understood why anyone would be interested specifically in information about the local geography and historical records of that region. But now everything suggests that Yunshuo stole those documents because of his plan to resurrect the monster. Qingmeng asks whether the association still has copies of those files, and the president confirms that they do, immediately ordering everything to be brought over. Her assistant then presents the reports from the Heroes Association's investigations in that region, along with municipal construction plans, local government documents, and other records related to the territory. After examining the material, Qingmeng realizes that her suspicions were correct. She explains that only the head of each generation of the Dongfang family knows the exact location of the spiritual spring, so Yunshuo could not simply search for it directly. Xingxuan assumes that he is using that information to figure out where the spiritual spring is located, but Qingmeng says that is not the case. Her brother's true target is the spiritual veins. The revelation surprises Xingxuan, Yunshu, and even the president herself, and the Water Witch recalls that, according to the story they were told earlier, the Dongfang ancestors had already severed those veins 100 years ago. Qingmeng confirms this, but explains that directly removing the seal on the spiritual spring is not the only way to free Yejiu. If Yunshuo can reconnect the spiritual veins and allow energy to flow normally through the region again, the spiritual spring will gradually be replenished. That way, even without knowing where it is located, he can provide enough energy for Yejiu to recover its strength and break the seal on its own. Xingxuan immediately realizes the seriousness of the situation and asks whether this means Yunshuo has already put the plan into action. Yunshu also becomes worried, remembering that an entire day has already passed since the battle. If Yunshuo started searching for the sealed veins before they did, the association may already be too late. Qingmeng, however, explains that there is still a chance. In total, 5 spiritual veins were sealed, and Yunshuo needs to reconnect all of them. If they can find those 5 veins before he does and protect the locations, they can prevent Yejiu's resurrection. The president immediately agrees and takes command of the operation, ordering every available member of the Heroes Association into action. The priority now is to find the 5 spiritual veins before Dongfang Yunshuo does. She begins assigning teams and orders Siren to lead the heroes who specialize in water, since one of the veins may be located in the ocean. The group is to block and monitor the entire maritime region, keeping watch for anyone suspicious trying to enter. Siren acknowledges the order and leaves with her team. At the same time, the president orders the personnel responsible for the documents to review all the information Yunshuo stole as quickly as possible, searching for any historical or geographical clues that might reveal the locations of the spiritual veins. The staff begin combing through the records, and when one of the teams reports that they found nothing, they are ordered to keep searching documents from even earlier periods. Next, the Water Witch puts Xing Xuan in charge of the heroes with the greatest sensitivity to different types of energy, ordering them to use their abilities to search for any unusual fluctuations that could reveal a spiritual vein. Yunshu, meanwhile, takes command of the combat troops and is assigned to establish security perimeters in the eastern region, search for Yunshuo, and arrest him as soon as he is located. The two confirm their orders and leave immediately. With the operation underway, the entire region enters Level 1 security alert. The population is instructed to return home, and a curfew is imposed due to the emergency. As the heroes spread throughout the city, the teams begin sending reports. One group says they found no clear energy reaction, while another reports that aside from the fluctuations caused by the superheroes themselves, there is no obvious sign of natural energy. However, shortly afterward, Team A makes contact and reveals that they detected an abnormal energy fluctuation at a chemical factory in the eastern suburbs and are heading there to investigate. Hearing this, Xingxuan immediately reacts and orders the team not to do anything on their own. She tells everyone to remain on standby as soon as they reach the factory and wait for her arrival before taking any action. Moments later, Xingxuan arrives at the chemical factory in the eastern suburbs, exactly where Team A detected the abnormal energy fluctuation. After landing, she looks around and finds it strange that no one is waiting for her. At that moment, Xingxuan sees a man running into the facility and immediately begins chasing him, complaining that she ordered the team to remain there until she arrived and wondering where everyone else went. But as she moves deeper into the factory, she finds several members of the team lying along the way and instantly realizes that something is wrong. Not knowing who attacked them, Xingxuan decides to warn Yunshu immediately, but suddenly an attack comes at her, and even though she manages to dodge, her communicator takes a direct hit. Mainyang then appears, saying that Xingxuan must have some skill if she managed to track them all the way there, while Fiery warns that the chase ends here. Suddenly, an explosion erupts and Xingxuan tries to escape the ambush. Several more explosions begin going off as Xingxuan keeps running desperately. Suddenly, Mainyang appears in front of her and launches an attack, and with no other choice, Xingxuan raises a large psychic barrier around her body, managing to block several consecutive impacts. Mainyang is surprised to discover that the girl possesses psychic abilities, while Fiery recognizes Xingxuan as the daughter of the missing psychic hero, Nian Dongxia. In reality, the psychic power she is using at that moment comes from a resource provided by the Heroes Association's Department of Science and Technology. Fiery then looks at Yunshuo, who is also there, and remarks that he remembers Nian Dongxia helping him in the past. Since Xingxuan is the daughter of his former benefactor, he asks whether Yunshuo intends to talk to her for a while. Hearing that, Xingxuan immediately asks if he knows her father, but Yunshuo shows complete indifference and says he is not interested. His priority at that moment is breaking the seal of the first spiritual vein. Before leaving, he tells Fiery and Mainyang to stop playing around and kill Xingxuan before he returns. Yunshuo then walks away to continue his plan, while Fiery comments that their boss really is a heartless man. He apologizes to the girl, saying that he can only feel sorry for her for working for someone so cold, but then covers his body in flames and tells Xingxuan to die. Fire begins spreading violently around Xingxuan, and Fiery starts using one of the 10 moves of the fire god, the Flaming Hammer. A massive hammer formed from flames appears and crashes directly down on Xingxuan, who reinforces her psychic barrier to withstand the impact. However, she immediately feels the overwhelming power of the blow and realizes that if this continues, her shield will not hold. Cracks begin spreading across the barrier until it finally reaches its limit. Knowing that she cannot die there before informing Yunshu and the others about the first spiritual vein, Xingxuan makes a decision at the last second and detonates her own psychic shield. The explosion rebounds against the force of the attack and throws her body out of the flaming hammer's range, allowing her to avoid taking the full hit, although she ends up falling injured to the ground. Mainyang realizes exactly what she did and remarks that at the last moment, Xingxuan deliberately exploded her own barrier to use the impact to launch herself out of the attack's range. Impressed by the girl's persistence, Mainyang approaches, places her foot on her to pin her against the ground, and says with satisfaction that she likes women who are this resilient. Chen Xingxuan then falls under Mainyang's illusion. With a provocative demeanor, she approaches and tells the two of them to get to know each other better. And under the effect, Xingxuan begins responding in a dazed voice that she will give her everything she has. Mainyang then continues guiding the situation, telling her to relax and give her everything, including her own life. But in the next instant, Xingxuan forcibly breaks free and immediately counters with the cloud-piercing finger, catching Mainyang by surprise. The villain cannot understand how the girl managed to break her illusion, and Fiery even mocks her, saying that cheap trick only works on certain people. Seeing that Xingxuan intends to escape, Mainyang remarks that the little princess wants to run away and concludes that there is no point trying to handle this gently anymore. For Xingxuan, the situation is already clear. In terms of direct combat and speed, she has no way to defeat or escape from the two of them. So, with no other option, the girl decides to bet everything on one last resort and thinks that Xuantian needs to notice the message. With that, she uses the cloud-piercing finger again, firing the technique as a signal while being pursued, hoping that he will understand the warning. Elsewhere, Xuantian senses a very faint spiritual fluctuation and immediately finds the aura strange. To him, it can only be Xingxuan using the cloud-piercing finger, and what is even stranger is that she resorted to that technique instead of her own psychic powers. The protagonist immediately concludes that she must be in danger and is using this method to get his attention. Without wasting any time, he tells Qingmeng to take over Zhao Xu's treatment because Xingxuan is in trouble and rushes off to rescue her. Qingmeng is left completely confused, while Xuantian shoots through the sky, thinking that Xingxuan has to hold on until he arrives. Elsewhere, Dongfang Yunshuo finally puts his plan into action. Watching the energy reaction, he gives the order to begin and quickly realizes that he was right. The first spiritual vein really was hidden there. Back on Xingxuan's side, the situation becomes even worse. After the impact, she falls injured to the ground and can barely stay on her feet. Mainyang looks down at her with a cold smile and warns that with the next attack, she will send her straight to hell. Exhausted, surrounded by enemies, and unsure whether she can hold out until Xuantian arrives, Xingxuan can only wonder if she is really going to die there. Even while cornered and thinking that everything might end there, Chen Xingxuan refuses to give up. She steadies herself on her feet once again and remembers that she is the daughter of the psychic hero, so she decides that even if she dies, she will still fight until the very last moment. At that moment, another explosive fire attack is already coming toward her, and Xingxuan responds by releasing the cloud-piercing finger, causing a colossal explosion that leaves the two villains shocked. Xingxuan manages to move away to protect herself, and after landing, wonders whether her own technique caused that, but quickly realizes it did not. When she senses someone behind her and turns around, she finally recognizes Xuantian and understands that he arrived in time. Relieved, she remarks that he really noticed her signal, and the protagonist immediately reassures her, embracing her and saying that everything is fine now because he is here. But Fiery explodes with rage at the interruption and shouts that Xuantian dared to attack him. Without wasting any time, he prepares another strike and summons his enormous flaming mace, swearing to send the protagonist straight to hell. Xuantian, however, faces the attack without flinching and immediately realizes that the enemy fights with fire. Because of that, he says that it was a good thing he brought that ally specifically for a situation like this. The Deep Sea King immediately appears, looks at Fiery, and even mockingly praises his flames, as though he has finally found someone at least somewhat interesting. The enemy barely understands what is happening before he is overwhelmed by Xiao Hai's counterattack, as the Deep Sea King uses the Sea King's advance and slams into him with tremendous force, sending him flying while he screams in pain. After that, Xiao Hai ends the exchange by saying that it is already over. With Fiery knocked down, Xuantian praises Xiao Hai's work, and Xingxuan is surprised to see him there. The protagonist then explains that he suspected he might end up encountering Dongfang Yunshuo, and if that happened, he would not be able to deal with all the other enemies at the same time on his own, which is why he asked Xiao Hai to accompany him. Meanwhile, Fiery gets back up in a rage, complaining that Xuantian ruined his fun, and Mainyang rushes over to support him, calling him Yanhua and asking if he is alright. Xuantian coldly replies that if that was fun to them, then he will show them what true cruelty looks like all the way to the end. Since the two of them mistreated Xingxuan earlier, he makes it clear that he is going to settle the score now. Yanhua still tries to keep up appearances and says he is not afraid just because he took a surprise hit, but he barely has time to react before the protagonist suddenly appears in front of him and strikes him again, making it clear that he is not joking around. Xuantian then finally gets straight to the point and demands to know where Dongfang Yunshuo is and what happened to the seal. He warns them that they had better answer quickly, because if they keep hiding the truth, this time he truly will not show any mercy. Without easing the pressure on Yanhua, Xuantian keeps him completely subdued and warns that this will be his last chance to answer. Trapped in front of the protagonist, Yanhua cannot understand what is happening, because Yunshuo had said that Xuantian was only at the qi refinement stage, yet his speed and strength are far beyond his own. Seeing her companion being pressured, Mei Young becomes irritated at being completely ignored, and charges at Xuantian, shouting for him to let Yanhua go. However, when her attack strikes the protagonist, nothing happens. The woman is shocked to realize this, because not even Yunshuo could withstand it in that manner. Watching from a distance, Xing Xuan begins to worry and asks whether Xuantian will end up passing out again after releasing such a huge amount of spiritual energy. Xiaohai reassures her, explaining that on Summer Island, the protagonist only lost consciousness because his body was still unable to adapt to the absurd amount of energy he had absorbed. Furthermore, that stored power does not fully belong to Xuantian yet, so for now, one of the few things he can do with it is release it outward. The problem is that every time he does this, part of that energy is lost and can no longer be absorbed in the future. On the other hand, releasing it also reduces the pressure on his body, almost like someone who has eaten too much and feels some relief after hiccuping. Xing Xuan finally understands, but Xiaohai watches all that energy with different thoughts, imagining that when the time comes to devour Xuantian, all that power might end up becoming his. Meanwhile, the protagonist turns his attention back to Mainyang and demands that she immediately reveal where Dongfang Yunshuo is. Watching the scene, Yanhua says that Xuantian is seriously underestimating their loyalty. To him, if it were not for Yunshuo, probably none of them would have survived until now. Refusing to give in, Yanhua begins trembling and gathers the last of his strength, shouting for Xuantian not to underestimate him as an enormous amount of flames begins erupting around his body. He then turns to Mainyang and orders her to run. Before the woman can react, he violently pushes her away, causing Mainyang to scream for him to stop. Yanhua then grabs onto Xuantian and asks whether the protagonist still wants to know so badly where Yunshuo is. He says that he will finally tell him, but Xuantian will have to wait until the two of them meet in hell. Immediately afterward, Yanhua gathers all of his energy and activates one of the 10 moves of the fire god, nuclear self-destruction. A gigantic amount of fire begins concentrating around the two of them, and Xingxuan desperately screams for the protagonist when she realizes what is about to happen. She tries to run toward Xuantian, but Xiaohai grabs her and tells her to get back, asking if she has lost her mind. In the next instant, Yanhua's technique explodes with full force. The impact engulfs the entire area and destroys the surrounding terrain, while Xingxuan continues desperately calling out for Xuantian. Xiaohai manages to keep the girl away from the explosion. As the two watch the enormous mass of fire completely consume the place where Xuantian and Yanhua had been. When the explosion finally begins to fade and dust covers the entire area, Xingxuan is devastated, believing that the protagonist may have died because of her, while Xiaohai thinks that if Xuantian really has been eliminated, this would be the perfect opportunity to act against him. Mainyang, meanwhile, also looks at the destruction and blames Xingxuan entirely, saying that Yanhua ended up dying because of her. Completely consumed by rage, the woman swears that she will fight Xingxuan to the very end, but before she can do anything, a voice suddenly says that Xuantian is fine. When the smoke finally begins to clear, two silhouettes appear inside the enormous crater left by the explosion. To everyone's surprise, Xuantian calmly walks out of the wreckage practically unharmed, still carrying an unconscious Yanhua. Mainyang and Xiaohai are completely shocked by the sight. Xiaohai cannot believe that the protagonist survived an explosion like that in such a condition, and even begins wondering whether Xuantian can still be considered a normal creature from Earth, mentally lamenting that he lost the opportunity he thought he had to act against him. Irritated by this, he vents his frustration by repeatedly pounding the ground. Xingxuan, on the other hand, is extremely relieved and celebrates when she realizes that Xuantian really is all right. Mainyang simply cannot accept what she is seeing, because Yanhua's suicidal technique should have been devastating, yet apparently even that failed to seriously injure the protagonist. To her, it simply should not be possible. Xuantian continues carrying the injured Yanhua and tells Mainyang that their determination truly surprised him. Because of that, he offers her one last way out. He will return Yanhua so she can take him to receive treatment, since the man still has a chance of surviving. But in exchange, Mainyang must reveal where Dongfang Yunshuo is. The woman hesitates at the proposal and can barely respond when a voice suddenly says that they no longer need to keep searching. At that very moment, a massive golden seal begins glowing, covered in energy, and soon a gigantic pillar of light erupts into the sky. Yunshuo announces that the seal has been broken. and the release of the first spiritual vein causes an explosion that makes the entire region tremble and sends rocks and debris flying everywhere. Realizing the danger, Xuantian tells Xingxuan to hold onto him and also grabs Xiao Hai to get the two of them out of there, drawing a complaint from the Deep Sea King because of the very inappropriate place where the protagonist ended up grabbing him in the rush. After they manage to escape the initial explosion, Xingxuan asks what just happened, and Xuantian realizes that despite making it there, they were still one step behind the enemy. Yunshuo really did manage to break the first seal. Taking advantage of the chaos, Yunshuo manages to retrieve Yanhua and after finding Mainyang, asks whether she can still move. The woman confirms that she can, and the two begin retreating. Xuantian notices them escaping and shouts at Yunshuo not to even think about running away. But his opponent shows no concern. He says that he does not mind fighting the protagonist right then, but advises Xuantian to first look at what is happening around him. Yunshuo explains that now that the spiritual vein has been unsealed, all the energy that remained trapped for centuries is being released at once. In just a few moments, that torrent will engulf everything around them, including the people who are still lying injured throughout the area. He then asks whether Xuantian truly intends to ignore all of them just to continue the chase. The protagonist becomes furious because he understands exactly what Yunshuo is doing, but he cannot abandon those people. With no other choice, he stops the pursuit and tells Xiao Hai and Xingxuan to immediately begin rescuing the injured. The two confirm and rush off to help, while the flow of energy continues destroying the area. Before disappearing, Yunshuo taunts Xuantian one last time, reminding him that this was only the first vein and that 4 other seals still remain. He challenges the protagonist to try stopping him if he can. Xuantian, while helping carry one of the injured people away from the area, angrily replies that Yunshuo can wait, because before long he will personally take him down. By 9 that night, all the chaos has already begun affecting the First People's Hospital. The corridors are packed with injured people brought in from the affected region, while doctors and nurses rush back and forth trying to stop bleeding and deal with the sudden flood of patients. Some people even begin complaining, asking where the members of the Heroes Association are when such a major tragedy is happening, while others desperately beg for treatment. Xingxuan and Xiao Hai are also at the hospital after helping with the rescue, but suddenly the girl seems to think of something, quickly gets up, and tells Xiao Hai to come with her. Without explaining why, she simply starts pulling him away, leaving the Deep Sea King completely confused and asking what she is doing. Later, Xuantian finally returns alone to the Dongfang family residence. Yunshu finds him and asks if her brother is back, but quickly notices from his appearance that he is completely exhausted. She asks whether Xingxuan was really at the scene and whether anything went wrong. Xuantian simply says no, hiding everything that happened at the factory. Yunshu then asks if he is hungry and, thinking that her brother must need something to eat after a day like that, changes clothes in a matter of seconds, appearing fully prepared with an apron and cooking utensils to make him a late-night meal. Xuantian, however, refuses and says that he is fine. He only wants to rest and asks Yunshu not to stay up too late either. His sister agrees but keeps looking at him, clearly sensing that something is wrong. Once he is alone, Shishi asks why he decided to hide the truth from Yunshu when his sister was obviously worried about him. Xuantian admits that he knows, but explains that he could not simply tell her that at that moment, he is not sure he can defeat Dongfang Yunshuo. If Yunshu knew that, she would probably start following him everywhere and end up putting herself directly in the middle of that danger. To him, telling her the truth now would be practically the same as pushing his own sister into a fire. Shishi remarks that the two siblings are exactly alike because they care deeply about each other, yet neither of them can be completely honest. Even so, she reassures her disciple and says that Yunshuo's techniques are not impossible to deal with. What Xuantian needs to do is discover the flaws within the 8 Taoist techniques. Hearing that, the protagonist immediately becomes interested and asks what kind of weaknesses those techniques have. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.